Good morning, everyone. It is 9:01. We're going to call this meeting to order. If everyone would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we've got several items here that we're going to discuss today. First on the agenda was FDEM Director Kevin Guthrie. He couldn't be here today. Stephanie is not in here, so we're going to have to move that down for now, and we'll just move on to the post-disaster recovery plan. I believe Tidal Basin is here to give us some update. Oh no, they're down the bottom. We've got the post-disaster recovery plan. Who's covering that? You?
Sorry. I was going to suggest that post-disaster recovery plan and our development incentives and public response kind of be lumped together as one item, and I'd like to just basically make the recommendation that we've all talked about the need for a master plan for redevelopment, that we kind of lump it into that, and we'll need to hire a planning firm to conduct that master plan. So I would suggest that we just have someone come and present to us at a later date on the master plan development.
Does anyone have any questions for the town manager on that?
We do have a brief question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Town Manager, when you talk about a master plan, just in terms of what your vision is, can you explain how that differs from what we're doing with our comprehensive plan? We're revising and updating our comprehensive plan, which is pretty, forgive the redundancy, comprehensive. How is what you're talking about different than that?
So, an urban plan is probably a little higher altitude look with all the damage in your urban area, in the Times Square area, with the pier and the county assets that are there, with the new transportation project at the base of the bridge, with the fact that your structures, more than likely, a lot of them will be elevated. All your movements of traffic and people change. And so, and we're not hard selling this. This is just a concept that has been discussed over the last few weeks. Because of your situation, do you want to take a step back, even while your comp plan and everything work is going on, and have someone look at your urban core and bring stakeholders together, business community, chamber people, transportation people, all these things, county, city, obviously, town, obviously. It's not an easy process. Keith and I, there was an urban planning project that went on in Pensacola, downtown Pensacola, while we were there. It's just kind of, at this point in time, is it something you want to do because there's a lot of changes coming. And I'm not an urban planner, and I'm doing the best to describe this process to you. It can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, and it's something we've talked to Mr. Guthrie about in terms of funding. But before we went another step further, we have the gentleman that did the Punta Gorda plan. The mayor I sent the mayor, and I'm sure Keith can send all of you that plan. But before we went any further, we just wanted to have some sort of conversation, obviously, with y'all to see if it's something that you want to engage in or not.
And please don't misunderstand. I'm not opposed to it. I just think that those additional details are helpful for people so they can get a sense of how this differs from our revising of the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, I would also add that the comprehensive plan basically is our policies and objectives laid out in law. It's submitted to the state and approved at the state. A master plan under the conditions like Chris was talking about, actually we've talked about the need for, or maybe perhaps a desire for, incentives for developers and reinvestors coming in. That's not in the comprehensive plan. So we would develop a vision of how we want to see the redevelopment and what are the public benefits for that redevelopment. We could capture that.
That additional detail is helpful. Thank you.
Sure thing.
You know, it's been brought up to me several times by a member of our LPA who is a planner, and he has a number of people throughout the state of Florida, been through these things before. They're willing to come to us free and set up a workshop and to do this. That may be an option for us to look at because they're ready and waiting for the go-ahead.
I would also, I mean, we have layers, right? We have Jason Green, our planner here. We have Sarah, who helps, you know, packetize up, if you will, civic projects. And we have Eddie No, who is working on the comp plan, is also looking at the vision. So what are the qualifications of this person compared to Eddie No?
Well, I have had one or two conversations with Eddie since I've been here, so I'm not real sure. I know that he's coming over next week. The LPA has a meeting next week. A lot of the work that they've done over the last couple of months, I hope they'll kind of review and settle on some of the recommendations that came out of all these discussions they've had. And then Eddie's going to kind of kick off the comp plan and the LDC work and hope that moves forward. Again, I don't know his firm, you know, whether his firm would be capable of doing this kind of thing or not. I haven't talked to him about it. And I'm not promoting anybody right now. And if we can get it done free, I'm all for free. We're all trying to work and do things as efficiently as we can. But you want somebody that's done this. Having all the community input takes very skilled people to bring consensus to a point, or else you just end up with throwing a lot of things against the wall and see what sticks. So all I say is you want someone that's experienced in urban planning and public charrettes and all that, and there's all sorts of techniques that you use to build consensus among multiple stakeholders. All I'm saying is I don't know Eddie's firm. You'd want somebody that's done it. Okay,
just because, you know, as much as I appreciate, you know, planning in advance, I do feel that we've gone through a lot of this already with the previous council, where we had presentations from Eddie about 15-minute walking communities, and you know, went down quite a long road with that already. But I'm just a little hesitant to put another step in the process that delays the commercial people, particularly, from being able to recover. You know, so if this is going to delay things by a couple more months, that gives me a little bit of a pause.
I mean, I think it could be done pretty quickly. I think one of the biggest positives that could come out of it is architectural design, so that people are on the same wavelength and one person's not going in this direction, another. We have some synergy of how we want the new build to look like. So, and we can do it quickly. I mean, we don't have to wait months for a meeting. We can get them down here next.
Well, you know, and we could go on and on how this stuff works. And again, I'm not a planner, but we've already heard a lot of conversations about public benefit on redevelopment. We're going to have a lot of conversation about workforce housing. You've got a lot of people coming to you all the time with development ideas. You need, whether it's Eddie's firm or whoever it is, this is complicated stuff, and a plan that you can kind of send people to so that they know what you're looking for, and whether you need pedestrian corridors in your commercial area or bike paths, or golf cart movement and parking, and it just goes on and on, how you move people around safely. And again, back to the county assets, you've got how do you connect the pier and the parks safely? Do you do overwalks over Estero? I don't know. It all takes a planning effort. Not necessary. You can let it go and it'll happen, without a plan. I'm not trying to, believe me, this is not a sales pitch. It's just, if you want to do it, now's the time to start it. If you wait much longer, it'll be too late. Things are going to happen quickly at this point. So it's really up to y'all whether it's, and this is not even a vote. We don't vote. It's just, do we even bring people in for a workshop to answer your questions more than I can or Keith can? That would be the next step, is if you even want to entertain the conversation, we can have much more conversation about it.
I think it makes a lot of sense to me anyway. And we get a consistent message to developers and those folks instead of trying to piecemeal everything and making it look like a jigsaw puzzle.
Really?
Yeah. Again, I have no problem with the concept, but I think it would be wise, and I know it's different from the comp plan, but because we are revising our comp plan right now, and that discussion is somewhat mature, maybe we could have it be a subset of the revision of the comp plan. So, as Councilor Veach said, we're not slowing things down, and as Karen said, we could workshops, we could do it quickly. I just, with the comp plan being, I mean, everything we're going to be talking about, and I know it's a unique subset of what a comp plan is, but they're so related that I wonder if we could just marriage those two and just, in the interest of time and efficiency, still just sort of unite those two concepts under the review of the comp plan, just so we could move quickly and efficiently. Just thinking out loud.
I would say too that like things like architectural design lightly, because I don't think we want a gated community look, right? We want to be able to, the eclectic thing is really what makes the island interesting. But the grander things, like being able to make room for golf carts and bike paths and all that, that would require us to be willing to eminent domain a lot of places or provide a lot of incentives that would have to be universally accepted to like widen Estero where we need it to be. I think that they say we have a clean slate, but we still have our overlay where we have all the different properties and the property lines and the usages laid out. It seems like usage is one thing that we can change, but you can't take property from Bob and give it to Bill. That there's just limitations in what we can do based on the nature of the island. And I don't want to delay things too much to go down the road and decide that, well, we're not going to eminent domain, we're not going to take a heavy hand, and then we've just delayed people for not much benefit.
Well, I'll apologize for the noise if you're hearing it in the background. We're moving some equipment around. We're trying to get them to at least turn the truck off, but I don't know that we're getting any headway. But I think what you're hearing is that the consensus is to move forward with trying to, if there's someone that's willing to do it for free, certainly take that route, to work in conjunction with Eddie.
And one thing I think would be useful is to review what we've done already. And I realize that you guys weren't around for it, but we did go pretty far down the road. We had some talks about some concepts and things, and I think it would be good to at least review what we did, review where we are, and so we're not abandoning that and starting from scratch.
Well, I think we can add that to it as well, but I can give you the name of our LPA member that has the people put together, ready and waiting, and we can kind of go from there.
All right. Is there any more questions for the town managers before we move on?
Mr. Mayor, if just two observations, particularly in light of the comment that some of you all made, in particular Councilmember Woodson. The Florida legislature, in its infinite wisdom, as it continues to erode your home rule powers year after year in Tallahassee, very recently, I think it was in the last legislative session or the year before, limited and prohibited the ability of local governments to establish architectural standards. So you no longer have the ability to, through this process, establish guidelines as to how you would like your community to look potentially going forward in the form of architectural standards. You've been severely restricted in that ability, number one. Number two, whatever the process is that, or decision that this body makes toward entertaining this idea of going through the process of creating a master plan, post-disaster, whatever you want to call it, it would have to eventually go through the normal procurement process where it would be open to any interested firm that may want to submit a proposal, or and for you all then to take a look and decide who you may want to engage to assist you in that process, including, to Councilmember Veach's observation or comments, the Corradino Group, which is currently the planning firm that's engaged to prepare your updated comprehensive plan.
All right, thanks for that update, John. So when you're saying architecture, you're essentially not talking about the width of a building or the height of the building, more as the color of the shutters or the type of shutters. Okay. All right. Next, we've got a presentation, Town Hall Rebuild Design Concepts. I believe someone from Ajax is here. Yeah.
So let me do a little introduction. Oops, sorry, on this item, because I feel somewhat responsible for this. So through one of the discussions that we had with Director Guthrie in his visits, he suggested that we reach out to some folks who were experienced in planning for public facilities. He had gone through this exercise on an expansion of the EOC in Tallahassee and gave us a few names, and which we did, and we reached out to Ajax Construction. Mr. Tim Sewell is here, their regional director from Ajax, and Todd Sweet is here from Sweet Sparkman. My understanding is Sweet Sparkman is involved in the planning for the fire station construction project, but they are here volunteering to help answer questions. The goal this morning is to give you a general understanding of what it will take to replace your town hall, a schedule, some cost estimating, show some very preliminary interactions between the property that you own and the property that the fire district owns. I hope the fire chief would be here this morning. If there are any questions, I don't see him in the room, but they're going to walk through a little PowerPoint. We have the technology capability, and you've got the handout, and it kind of explain what we've been working on over the last month or so.
It's not really.
Let's try this one. Oh, that sounds good. Now I can hear myself. All right. Well, good morning. I'm Todd Sweet. I'm principal with Sweet Sparkman Architecture. We're architects and planners and interiors. Just to give you a little bit of background, but not to go too much detail, yeah, we do this type of work. As you were referring to, we really do a lot of our practice on public sector work. We're doing a new town hall for the city of Bradenton, completed one for the city of Venice, working with Tim and Ajax on a large expansion and renovation to the Charlotte County Courthouse. So we kind of do this sort of work, this sort of programming. But this has been a very high-level exercise that we've gone through with your administrative staff. There's a timeline here about what's really progressed over the last 3 weeks or so, met on site initially, and then been working on a program for Town Hall, which includes some planning for future growth, and then just very, very preliminary planning of that site. The idea is to come up with a program and then some budgetary costs working with Ajax, so we can provide you some data on what it would cost to replace the Town Hall. Tim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about Ajax.
Yeah, Tim Sewell with Ajax, Regional Director. We were asked to get involved, and we happily did so. There's no fee with any of this, so that's a good thing. We just wanted to give you maybe some options or identify a path forward. You know, from our perspective as builders, these kind of facilities day in and day out, and maybe just make the conversation continue to happen and the questions continue to happen in terms of what this process looks like from a design and then a build standpoint, new town hall.
Okay, so with the limited time that we do have, we just have an agenda. We're going to go through, you'll see the timeline that we have in your handout. We'll talk about a program, very preliminary site plan of how a town hall and then the neighboring fire station and administrative facility, maybe there's some discussion about some shared spaces, uses, utilities. We're going to talk about an estimate and then a schedule and then the next steps. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the program and the conceptual master plan. Based on the discussions that we've had with the administrative staff, we're coming up with a preliminary budget estimate of about 35,000 square feet. So we've gone through each of these departments, starting with finance, going all the way with shared conference spacing, and coming up with some ballpark estimates of each of your departments. And then, of course, including a factor on top of that, which includes circulation, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, and all that stuff. It's about 35,000 square feet. And that does include about, I would say conservatively 10 to 15 years of future growth, because we want to make sure that when we complete this, you're not going to be outgrown by the time you're ready to move in.
What's the square footage of the old town hall?
It's about 18,000 square feet. Yeah. So, which is a very good question, because at 35,000 square feet, it's likely going to be a 2-story town hall. And of course, we're going to want to elevate it. So what you're seeing there in the diagram next to that is a 2-story new town hall that's elevated, because you're in a coastal zone, which is going to require you to raise your finished floor at about 16 feet. So you're at 5 feet now, roughly, the elevation of the site. We're going to raise this building, which is going to allow you to maybe to do some secured parking or parking underneath the building. So that is what we are planning for, roughly a 17,500 square foot floor plate. Multiply that by 2. That will still get us within the height restrictions that you have on Fort Myers Beach.
Not to get too granular with it, but just to kind of update the council as to how you came to a lot of these numbers and the size, because I'm sure that's going to be a question as to, can you just touch a little bit on how you sat down with the staff from each department and saw what they had, or talked to them about the challenges they had, the future needs they see, to be able to come up with where we're at now?
Yeah, and what is not included, I also want to preface that by saying this is very high level at this point. This was basically meeting on site with the staff, going through each of the departments, talking about what currently the size is, where they see underserved program spaces, how we needed to increase those program spaces, and what we knew, trying to anticipate how many additional employees that you would have in 10 years, 15 years, really going through each of those departments. Now, in addition to this, there's also some further development, so we go into the weeds. That's not included as part of this presentation, but there was an exercise where we're really substantiating these numbers a little bit more. But it's very preliminary at this point. We would probably, if you engaged an architect or a designer, you would want to start with the programming exercise confirming a lot of these numbers. I think this is a good ballpark estimate to where we are right now. We would want to confirm some of these. Also in the diagram, you'll see the neighboring fire station. At this point, we're assuming the town hall will be on your property, the fire station will be on their property. We are showing this sort of, we're calling it a bridge connection, possibly between these two buildings. Maybe there's a discussion of shared conference room spacing, some shared program spaces between these two facilities. There's, there could be the possibility of sharing a central energy plant, utility connections. Of course, the fire department will have a fuel filling site, so there will be some shared amenities between these two groups. But right now, we're planning on your site would be independent of the fire station site. We're also showing some of their, your recent land acquisitions, like the canal access, and maybe whatever happens in the back of Public Works there, maybe a public park or so. I think also we're also showing in the red dashed lines a connection to the community park and pool. That's just east of Gulf Beach Road from the town hall. With that said,
I just have another quick question now, and I know this is you're doing a very high level thing, but is there a possibility to phase this so that we can build it in a way where we build what we need now, but then we have expansion space to do the expansion later, the doubling later?
Yes, there's always the possibility to do that. Tim could probably talk a little bit about more the cost implications with doing a phased approach, but we're actually working with the fire department on that same idea. How do we phase it if we need to phase it? So yes, that is definitely a possibility. Probably some cost implications to doing that without, because you're prolonging the construction duration. So there will be some additional costs with doing that, but Tim could probably talk a little bit more on that.
What typically happens when you do the phase kind of approach, what typically happens when you do a phased approach is you'll have some upfront cost that's much less than the building the whole facility at one time, but there will be some increased costs for planning for foundations, maybe planning for some larger structural members to work with the expansion in the future. So those things we would have to evaluate, but typically it's a fairly minor cost to prepare for a future addition, and then you're going to get the cost when the addition happens. So it really depends on, is your addition going vertical above where your building is, or is it going to the side, which is a much more straightforward addition versus building on top of a building and going up. So we need to have some parameters set in terms to answer that question fully. But
so it sounds like it would be cheaper up front, but at the end it would actually cost a little more.
At the end, I think it would definitely cost a little bit more by doing the phased addition approach. Build the original building, then build the phase onto it afterwards. That would cost more. You've got not only the building itself and some of the escalation within the marketplace that we're seeing that's been there for the last 2 to 3 years, but also just the staffing of the general contractor or the construction manager. You're going to have to have somebody there longer for that as well for the next phase of building. So it is more expensive to do it that way, but we've done it that way because of budget limitations and whatnot.
All right, thank you.
All right. So yeah, we can run through. So I took what Todd just kind of described as the 35,000 square foot facility, the various elements, and what we find is the site work piece is always the biggest unknown. It's what's under the ground, you can't see it. The building components tend to be much more manageable because you can define it by size, by square footage, by volume. So this estimate you're looking at basically takes the building of 35,000 square feet and puts a number for the building all by itself. And then beyond that, you start to see the site work elements, the utilities, the infrastructure to support that building, the landscaping, irrigation. We also talked preliminary about some EV capability for EV charger stations at the town hall site. So we've allocated some dollars for that because not everybody that's building town halls are putting that capability in. So we went ahead and put that in as a standalone element. And then, as you can see, we have a public works section. The discussion there was kind of a well fenced in area with a hardscape, whether that's asphalt or concrete, and with a fueling capability of being able to, at least on a small scale, fuel your public vehicles. And then beyond that, Todd mentioned the pedestrian bridge. So we kind of looked at what it would look like to have an elevated bridge that spans from the fire station to the new town hall, and what that cost would be. And then we kind of divided it in two, not knowing how to show those numbers. But this represents about half, that 490 represents about half of what we think that elevated structure would be. Now it'd be much more efficient to go with a crosswalk kind of approach that's down at grade level. But we started here for discussion. We did put a 10% contingency and escalation. Just a little bit of an update. Over the last year and a half, we've probably seen anywhere from 30 to 40% escalation on many construction pieces of commodity that we buy day in and day out. So every job we do, we start with a contingency, with an escalation contingency, and then once we bid it, we're able to much better hone in on what the final cost is. But at this stage of the game, with where you're at, we believe carrying at least 10% at this point makes the most sense. And then you can see the CMPs, bonds, insurance, taxes, and whatnot lying there. So right now, from a construction perspective, we're at just over $600 a square foot. We did compare this with a number of other buildings, and that's how we really drove into that $15 million number, was really kind of looking at 2 or 3 other buildings we've done over the last 3 to 4 years and saying, okay, if we were to project those costs up based on current escalation, and then what are the elements that we'd have to add to that to make this a complete job. So that's how that's put together. We also have design cost and below the line cost and owner FF&E target budget. All of these would have to get validated. I mean, there's a lot of discussion to have once you bring somebody on board to start, really asking all the questions and figuring out the job in total as to what it's going to take. If no questions on the budget, the next slide. Yeah.
If we're going to just discuss the budget just briefly, I'm trying to understand our strategy here. A couple things. I think you said that the current town hall has 16,000 square feet?
I had remembered
Ballpark?
18,000, but it's 16 to 18,000 square feet.
So you're, let's say you spend the night here tonight, and you go over tomorrow to the food truck at Mom's, and somebody happened to be watching this from the public, and they said, gosh, we saw your presentation, and the new proposed town hall is 35,000 square feet, almost double the existing town hall. And they would look at you and say, what's that all about? What would kind of be your sort of layperson's response to that?
In terms of the size of the facility?
Yeah, literally, it sounds like almost doubling the size of the town hall.
Well,
but I think it's nuanced, and that's why I want to ask you that, so you can explain it.
So, and I'm just going to, Todd touched on it previously a little bit, but I believe it's really driven by the number of FFE folk or full-time individuals that's going to be working in and out of that facility. I'm remembering a number of about 70, Todd. I don't know if that's fully accurate, but as we have these discussions with the various departments, and they say, okay, we have 5 people and they need to be housed within the town hall, and each person needs X amount of square feet. That's how that number kind of starts to develop into what the full program based on the full usage of the facility. And then you have areas like community space, council chambers, which has to kind of stand alone as to how many people you want to have be able to come to that meeting space. So all those things come together, and I believe that's a big driver of how we ended up at 35,000 square feet was based on all those discussions. So.
And if I could ask the town manager, and I see Mr. Book in the audience as well, and I appreciate you beginning this conversation and putting some numbers and square footage here. And is our strategy to have this be one of, I think we discussed this on Monday, this will be one of the pieces that we bring to the legislature for some help, and obviously you need something concrete to show them. Is that in essence our strategy?
Absolutely.
And so would we be asking the legislature for the entire amount, for part of the amount minus insurance? What's the strategy of the ask with respect to this particular item?
Well, you'll get to your legislative appropriations request here in a few minutes, and Mr. Book can respond. But the challenge is to fill some gaps. So FEMA will reimburse you for your expense to build back what you had. So approximately half, I'm rounding everything, of this concept that's being presented would be reimbursable through FEMA. The trouble is, it is a reimbursement program, so you have to have the upfront dollars to move the project along. And you're about to get into the schedule here in a minute, and if you're going to proceed now, it's a 3-year timeline. So yes, our strategy with the legislature is to, if we can, to put a program together where we have help up front to kick the project off. It can go over, obviously, several fiscal years for the state, and then when FEMA reimburses, we can kind of repay the program. I'm not saying that you won't have to finance a portion of this yourself at some point in time, but we're going to Tallahassee starting next week, trying to meet with people. You're absolutely right that we now at least have something other than just a wild guess in terms of what we need, and be prepared to explain what we need and try to secure funding from the state so that we can move this project along.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
And just kind of along that line, one thing I'm not very comfortable with the idea of implicating that if we double the size of the town hall, that we're expecting to double our staffing. And another thing is, as far as a strategy, if we said that FEMA will reimburse us maybe for rebuilding what we had, that if we built 1 floor instead of the 2, and then tried to have that reimbursed by FEMA, would it be less expensive to finish the 2nd floor than it would be to build 2 floors? You know what I mean? Would that be the cost-effective way to do it from our standpoint?
Let me point out that make sure the facility you had was not adequate. So you start with, was the town hall that you had adequate for the use that you had? And my understanding, I'm being told it was not. You did not have enough room for the people that you were trying to cram in there, or the people that had to work in other locations that maybe should have been in town hall. So you have to start with the premise that what you had wasn't adequate. So you are catching up on some of your deficiencies on space. We're not doubling staff, obviously, so I just wanted to point out.
All right, and I think it's important to reiterate that this was just an exercise to get a number, to be able to have discussion points. We obviously all know we no longer have a town hall. We're working out of tents and portable trailers, so it's a high priority for the town to be able to engage with our residents. And the numbers that you're seeing here as far as square footage are they're not concrete, no pun intended. They're put together by conversations with the staff and Ajax and these guys to, in a perfect world, how much space do you need? So some of the things that you're seeing here, I don't think we need to get into the weeds too much about it. They're just trying to explain, I think, how you got to where we're at with these numbers, so that we, again, as he said, when we're up at Tallahassee, we can somewhat educate them as to the amount it's going to cost to get us back into something. And when they get to the time frame, I think that may be a little shocking when you hear that. But
yeah, I just went back and looked at the program, and we are planning for additional staff in the terms of offices and cubicles, which is the increase in the square footage. Also, when you do a multi-level building as opposed to just one level, you're also increasing the amount of factor, because now you have elevators, you have stairs, you have all those things that really add up to the square footage. So there's a bump in square footage as a result of that too. 2 to 3 stairs, elevator machine room, all that vertical circulation now.
Another point I wanted to make is the importance of planning with the fire department. They're probably ahead of you in terms of their process. What was obvious to me when you look at aerial photography is the connection between these properties and the other recreation facilities that you have here. The parking that's such a high priority can be created that allows more opportunity for the public, especially on weekends. You have several beach accesses that are right across the street. So how you master plan the sites to take advantage of all the assets that you have and move people between parking areas and other common areas is important as you go forward and work with the fire department on their plan.
I would also just, I think I really like the idea of having a good physical connection with the fire department to enhance communication with the number of things we do. I think that's a good thing. I do think, though, any kind of sharing would have to come up with an interlocal agreement, since the fire department and the town have different funding sources.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah. So walking through real quickly on the schedule, this is broken down kind of color-coded, or tried to be color-coded for ease of reading. The blue first 2 bars are really saying if you were going to go out with an RFQ to solicit a design firm and a CM firm, you've got some time there for that, and then you've got some time to finalize or negotiate and finalize the contract with them in terms of the services being provided. So we've plugged in about 4 months for that process, and we believe, at least based on tentative discussion, the target would be to have the project funding in place by the time you've got your CM and design team on board. So that's what that triangle or diamond shape looks on the third line. And then we're off and running. We're in design. You see the green bars, it's showing the various levels of design that's working through the process: schematic design, design development. Of course, we're revalidating these numbers at each one of those deliverables to make sure that we're staying on target with where the budget is versus where the design is heading. And then what we've been doing on a lot of our projects of late is, in order to deal with the market conditions on the supply chain issues, where generators are taking 72 weeks to get, or elevators are taking 65 weeks. Switchgear is a major issue on just about every job. So we would recommend that you buy those things earlier than, within the design process, so that you can lock them in and you can get them moving so that they're going to show up timely for the construction. So that this shows a 2 GMP kind of approach, with that equipment in GMP 1, and then the final GMP would be everything else. Of course, permitting running, the gray lines represent the permitting, and then the blue represents the building summary process, and then the yellow box kind of gives you the blow up of what each one of those big sections are in terms of time. And then Todd, you touched on a number of these on the next slide. It's kind of just things to consider. What's next?
Yeah, we just put a list of things to, sum up the presentation with things we want to consider and what the next steps would be. Obviously, you'd want to, do that RFQ for CM and design services, get them on board, but then start with some, what we're calling pre-design. You'd have to survey the site. We would have to confirm the program, go through a more rigorous program to see if we can reduce the size and start all before we put pencil to paper and design the building.
But these do represent.
Todd, you got to move it. Tim, sorry.
Sorry. Some of these items do represent some potential cost savings within the process. Example, generator backup. Most likely the generator for both of the fire station and this facility is going to want to be raised, or at least raised enough to where we have a comfort level that it's protected from storm surge. So if we were to do that in one location and distribute out to both buildings at that point, there's definitely, in my mind, some savings to be garnered. So some of this is kind of some savings ideas if it could be worked out with the Fire Station 31 design process as well. So.
Yeah, we've just so the rest of the council knows, we've had several joint meetings with the fire chief and his staff and these gentlemen here to figure out ways to save costs, to be able to combine resources, if you will, fuel stations, as you see on this page here. There's a lot of opportunities. We even entertained the option of putting both facilities on the same parcel. Logistically for them, that wouldn't work out as far as space requirements for their trucks and things. But so we've been really working hard with these guys to figure out ways to save as much money as possible, but also provide something that I think we all would really like to see, and that's a community center area that goes right along with our Bay Oaks Community Center area that provides a one-stop shop, if you will, for our residents to come in when they go through permitting. Many of us know that with permitting through us, they also have to get some permitting through the fire department. So joint spaces like that have been talked about. One thing that you didn't touch on here, I think that's pretty important, is that the fire department is working on a safe room, I guess you would call it, as part of their design that would allow key staff from our town as well as theirs to ride out another potential storm like we went through, so that response could be much faster right after the devastation. So that is being designed. It wasn't brought up in here because that's being worked out through their side. So there's been a lot of discussion, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time, Todd, Tim, to come out and brief my fellow council members on what this is. I also want to thank Director Guthrie for putting us in contact with you. As you said at the beginning, this was all done at no cost to the town to help us get to this point, so we really appreciate it.
We made that call very early on, and we just appreciate the opportunity. We know you guys are going through tremendous life here, so we want to be with help of whatever we can, so appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I just want to say one thing about Sweet Sparkman. So I sit on the board for Friends of Lovers Key, and we went through the whole build of our Welcome Discovery Center and the design and everything with Sweet Sparkman. And the quality of work, the quality of just the relationship through that whole process of 4 to 5 years, I think it took to get that built finally. But just excellent, excellent work.
Mr. Book, if you wouldn't mind, may we go with Stephanie real quick? Do you mind if we bring Stephanie back up real quick? Okay, Stephanie, and your last name you pronounce Stakowicz, correct?
Yeah. All right. So you'll have to forgive me. I didn't know that I was speaking, but I'm happy to represent Director Guthrie and any of the questions you may have. If I don't know the answer, I'll be sure to get it as quickly as I possibly can. I am the general counsel for DEM, so I'm more there for the beginnings, the contractual terms and conditions, and so anything programmatic, I might not know the answer to. So just full disclosure there, but I will get the answers quickly from our bureau chiefs. Mr. Hammers told me that you had some questions regarding first the staff augmentation for the different community development positions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that purchase order was issued. The period of performance is January 1 to, I believe, March 29th. And so it can be extended, but that's what the current period of performance is. Do you have any questions with respect to that?
So this is like for permitting?
That's, yes. It's for the community development, part of the permitting process, yes.
So the specifically the situational report says it'll be for code compliance and zoning, was approved by FDEM. The period of performance starts January 1st, 2023. The mission is focused on elimination of eliminating current backup of permitting reviews required by this town.
I think we have two separate missions that we've been working on, and what she's describing, I believe, was the first mission, and we've had permit type help from the state since I've been here. What we've been discussing, and I guess we'll get to maybe next, is the most recent one, which was a request for some higher level plan review, building official help. And go ahead.
Right, and so I think the building official is definitely something that we're looking into. With respect to the planning and higher level, that's something that's going to need to be approved by the governor's office, but I know that Director Guthrie has been having those conversations, so we're still working through those. Is that
Okay.
That's good.
Good. Any other questions regarding that?
Now,
So just since we're on this subject, Mr. Town Manager, because I think this is so important, we're so thankful for the state's help. Do you want to just give a brief description of how the state has helped buttress or supplement our permitting staff and team, and just give us a little idea of how the state has been helpful, because we're very thankful for that help, and we really need that help. So please go ahead.
So without getting too in the weeds, I'll try to be a high-level kind of overview. Obviously, very, very appreciative of all the help that Director Guthrie's given us and their staff. Glenn, who's been our on-site guy since the day I got here. There are a lot of changes going on right now. Obviously, the whole compound has been restructured over the last week or so. We are now out of their emergency trailers, at least one of them. A trailer across the way is what I call the admin trailer right now. We're still transitioning, but you have your clerk and the town manager, your PIO. Finance will move out of this little trailer they've been in since day one, hopefully by the first part of next week. The trailers to the left of us are what I call the Utilities Public Works trailers. So as of today, first day, we've kind of moved the staff for those two departments into that trailer. And last but not least, there'll be two trailers showing up maybe tomorrow and over the weekend that will create a U-shaped compound, and the building department, planning department that's in the Duval trailer will move next week into those two, and that'll make up your town hall. These trailers are being provided by the state at this point. We're pleading and hoping. We're told it's a 6-month commitment on these. I don't know how long we'll be in them, and we'll have to continue to work with our friends, but this is one of the most important projects, is to create an atmosphere on the building side. Larry, who's been spearheading this project of creating a town hall for us, has been working with Steve Popofsky on how that trailer will go. The main public parking area will be out front. We'll have a fenced area with a gate where the public can access the compound. We're hoping to create an entrance and a lobby, for lack of a better way, because right now the public's been coming to the back gate. They've been sitting with the security in the tent. We used to be over there with citizens and staff. We've been over here since that tent was taken down, but eventually you'll have a lobby area where the public can get access and be served by our building staff, and I hope it works better.
You know, Mr. Town Manager, that's exactly what I was trying to get out of you, is that you and your team and the state and their team is doing everything possible to supplement and to assist the permitting folks, because that's really one of the #1 concerns on our island right now. I just think it's important that you share that detail, because I think it's really helpful that we're really making these strides, because things are going to get better on the permitting front, because we're going to get more and more applications. And I just wanted to make sure the public was aware of the steps you're taking, and thankful for this, the help the state's providing, because it really is almost issue number one for our island right now.
And another big issue for us is the state's asking us to prepare a transition plan that shows when we will be able to stand on our own. And this is not just us, it's all the communities that were affected by the hurricane. And so there'll be a lot of work over the next few weeks on that plan. I think February 15th, I think, is a deadline when they're supposed to have that plan prepared. I think we're unique in that we had a high level of damage, and I'm pleading for as much patience with us from DEM as possible, because we won't be able to stand on our own as easily as other local governments in the region, and it will take us more time. The commitment they've made, I could go on and on. Cindy Davis, who's been in our finance department pretty much since I've been here, they made that happen almost overnight. Linda Toppy, who showed up a week or so ago, she's the HR professional with all the vacancies that we've got. We've really been able to ramp up and get more work done in the HR. I could go on and on. I mean, everything that we've asked for. The lighting situation, I wasn't real happy with the way the conversation went on Monday with our friends from Florida Power and Light. And we quickly started working on that Tuesday morning. They're not here today. You had asked that they come back, but we're not ready. We need better numbers. There's been a lot of work done on that, and DEM continues to just ask for what the cost will be to provide turtle lighting in the entire island. And that project, Mayor heard from Charlotte, I think, this morning, that it might be another week or so, but they're reworking their numbers on that. So again, on and on about how much support we get from DEM, very critical to the progress that we're making right now.
I'll let the mayor conclude, because I know he sees this every day through all the various meetings he's involved in. But I just, yesterday I had the pleasure of, privilege of interviewing Larry Peterson, sent to us, I think, early on for our kind of our local community awareness podcast that gets a lot of hits. And as I was trying to find him for the interview, just to give you a sense of the people that you have sent to help us, this guy was with his team of people. They had taken the damaged flagpole from our old town hall that was probably going to get thrown away or demolished, and they rehabbed it, brought it over to this sort of temporary compound that we're in, and we're raising the flagpole with the American flag, the Florida flag. And it was like a reenactment of Iwo Jima. They're pushing this flagpole up. It was so awesome. You know, and he said, you got to have a flag here. You got to have an American flag. You got to have a Florida flag. And that's the kind of can-do attitude that Larry and all of your folks have had here. And they just opened a beautiful emergency room right in the front of this complex that's open 24 hours a day for anybody here on Fort Myers Beach at no charge to the public, at a time when people are rebuilding and having all kinds of strange injuries as a result of that process. So again, not to take up time, but I just want to thank you and your team, and please thank Director Guthrie, and I know the mayor's probably got a lot to say on this too, because he sees it a lot more than anybody does, but just wanted to thank you for being here, and thank you for all your help. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well,
if you are set to try to conclude, I do have some other things to talk about.
And I do have additional updates. Thankfully, I think you hit on some of the ones I was going to speak on. The ICU unit that we put up is now functional and active, but I'm sure you're aware of that.
Yeah, I'd like you to finish your updates, and then if we have some questions for you. If that
Absolutely,
works.
that works. But I really appreciate it. And I know that Director Guthrie wanted to be here. We're working some issues in Tallahassee, and so because I was already planning to come in and help kind of with the operational challenges of debris, I did all the things that he was supposed to, all the meetings that he was supposed to be speaking in, this one included, apparently, I came to speak on his behalf. So happy to be here, and I know he's here, he wants to help. So however we can help, we're going to do so. So additionally, there were 2 code compliance staff members have been reassigned to the permit tech position, with 1 additional position filled January 10th of 2023. I want to make sure everyone is aware there. And then I know that whatever additional positions that you have requested, we are definitely taking it into consideration. We're looking at it. Anything that we get the approval for, we are going to move forward on, whether it gets reimbursed or not from FEMA. So there is that. So I'll turn now to the permitting issues that we may have had. Just an update, we just had a brief conversation outside with your permitting director and those folks, and I think we have all kind of reached an understanding of what the issues were, what the challenges were, and how our team can fix those. The big thing is we wanted to make sure that when we demolished the home, that we were able to take the slab with it, so the residents don't have to bear that cost later when they're trying to rebuild.
Just to add some clarity to what you said, when you're saying permitting, just so that everybody's aware, what you're talking about, the endebriscleanup.com program.
Yes, sir.
There was a little snafu, if you will, in the communication of what was required and what wasn't required to completely remove all of the debris, including the slab, and that is what you're referring to in the permitting issue.
For the demolition
Not in
permits.
its entirety, but this specific holdup that we've had to deal with.
Correct, and I've also made sure that all of our contractors who are doing the demolition are fully aware of the requirements, and they are registered and they're ready, and all the requirements that they have missed in the paperwork, they're going to make sure that is done as exponentially as possible to get those houses demoed. And all of the rest of the structures, sorry. So that's it with the demo permits, unless you have any further questions. Okay, and so then as it pertains, I know there's a question about state trailers, and I have a pretty extensive update there from our Bureau Chief of Recovery. Do you want me to go through the kind of the updates one by one?
If you would, just for clarity for those that are listening that have that specific question.
Absolutely. Okay, so site inspections have been completed on 18 properties in Fort Myers Beach. Out of 18 properties, 12 will be determined to be feasible. The program will continue to place units in the feasible sites as determined by the site inspections, even if the FEMA flood zones are the only physical limitation to site feasibility. Issued a total of 10 haul and install work orders. Out of the 10, 9 are in the process of unit installation, and 1 site is installed and awaiting eminent license in. A majority of applicants, 30, who have been approved and identified for the NCS participation requirement require a commercial site placement due to limitations of placing units on the property. Common reasons include renting a property rather than owning, site infeasibility due to limitations such as insufficient space for a unit or lack of available utilities on the site. The most beneficial area for partnership with the state program is assistance in identifying a suitable commercial park for replacement. So I don't know if we have any ideas there thus far. The city.
So you're saying that renters are not allowed trailers, it's strictly for property owners?
That's from our programmatic folks. That might be an issue that we're working through.
Okay.
The site of Fort Myers, I think just speaking off, it might be an issue of who owns the land and where we can place the trailers. So we might need assistance with, not so much they're not available for renting a trailer, but more specifically where we can place said trailers. So if the town has any assistance with where we can potentially place these trailers, that would be very helpful. The City of Fort Myers Beach finalized a permitting process with the state program on January 5th, 2023. That requirement required the haul and install contractors to register with the city, along with the procedural development of travel trailers specific installation requirements. That includes things like utilities and sewer, etc. The contractor registration was finalized as of January 11th, 2023. A sizable portion of applicants from Fort Myers Beach are households who have been coded P4, eligible for FEMA direct housing. So that's the big thing. Most of them are available for the more robust program. Under the NCS program, eligible requirements, placement of direct housing eligible survivors is considered a duplication of benefits, and those survivors are referred to take advantage of the FEMA housing assistance. Do you have any questions? I can do my best to either answer them or get the answers to the questions after.
I think for clarity, because you went through that pretty fast, essentially what you said is if they qualify for the FEMA housing, that's the route they have to go before the state program, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And that's a more robust program and provides more benefits. So the state's program is just a supplement. So we have trailers that we have purchased and are available after that program, but they have to go through the FEMA process before they can be eligible for the state program.
And when you say more robust, that's one of the things is the length of time. I believe the state's was 6 months and FEMA's is 18 months. That's one.
Correct. Yes, sir.
That's what you mean by robust. Okay. Any other questions? Do you have any more updates, Stephanie?
I do not. Those were the topics that I was told last night that you would potentially want updates on. So now whatever questions you have, I can try to answer them.
Councilor Vici, do you have a question you were wanting to ask earlier?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we actually had a conversation on this before. We have a complex potential area to redevelop in Times Square, and there seems to be consensus, people I talk to, that people would like to see Times Square stay at the ground floor if possible. Now, there's a number of different options that we could potentially do maybe for this, but it was suggested to me, I think it's a good idea, that instead of the town or even the property owners coming up with an idea and then trying to get that approved through the DEP and through FEMA, is that we sit down at the start and collaborate with DEP and collaborate with FEMA and you guys to vet possible solutions for Times Square redevelopment. So do it more as a collaborative effort as opposed to us driving it and then trying to get approval for something that we really hasn't been through your process.
Absolutely. So I know I can speak for DEM. Our staff would be willing to assist in any way that we can. So if it's not through DEM that we can ultimately enter into one of our available programs, then I know our staff, especially in the Mitigation Bureau, for this issue are very knowledgeable. And I actually have a list of potential programs that they said that your team should look into. But I think a more direct process would just be to set up a meeting with our Mitigation Bureau and our floodplain staff and kind of go over what the potential avenues are to rebuild and be more resilient and mitigate any future damages in the future.
So I would hope, is there council consensus to move forward with at least having some meetings and conversations with people going so we can come up with a plan?
Well, yeah, I guess I certainly think that's important. Times Square is very, as you said, we've got a lot of individual owners there as well as county assets and town assets. So I think it's going to require all of us to sit down and figure out the best plan of action. I believe there's been talks already about trying to set some meetings up. So I'm certainly in favor of having those discussions.
And obviously, as you've seen by Director Guthrie's commitment to the town, we might not have the program or the funding under DEM or FEMA reimbursement. However, I know that our staff, especially the bureau chiefs, will do their best to say, it can't be this, but here is another way that we can accomplish what you're looking for. And so, our staff are very knowledgeable, especially in their respective areas. So it's worth a conversation, and they'll point you in the right direction of what are the best avenues to explore.
And one of my big motivations is just so we don't waste time going down dead ends. So if people come up with an idea and they think this is going to solve the problem, and then go down the road with it, and then find out that it doesn't. That
right.
We do that from the get-go. So.
Absolutely, and I mean, just so much as just regular hazard. While we were sitting here, I was asking our bureau chief, is it a possibility under the hazard mitigation grant funding program? Is it possible under CDBG? And some of them she said no. Some of them she said maybe. It depends. It's not eligible under 406. So, I think understanding the specifics, and I know it's a very complex issue, and different programs may be relevant. Sitting down with those subject matter expertise, and we're happy to be those and to assist and pull in our state agency partners where needed.
So we're going to have an extensive discussion about the hazard mitigation project list here in just a minute. We've got like 3 pages of projects to review with you.
Are there any more questions for Stephanie? I know you're very busy, so.
I'm sorry, Stephanie. I've got to ask you this. over the last couple weeks, I've been having conversations with various people at CVS. And CVS is the only pharmacy on Fort Myers Beach. And Mr. Book was kind enough to give me the lobbyist contact, and I've been working with him. And I had a conference call yesterday with one of the government affairs people from CVS. And we love CVS, and they're a great pharmacy on our island. But they have not started anything with respect to rebuilding. But they are committed to our island, and it's a large corporation. Would it be possible to pass along to Kevin to maybe share with the governor, if the governor could just pick up the phone and just a 2-minute call and let the CEO of CVS know that, first of all, we love their presence on the island, we appreciate them here, but just sort of ask if they could sort of prioritize the rebuild process on our island to get that pharmacy up and running, because it's so critical to our island, to our seniors, and I just don't think they fully understand. I think they're committed to coming back, but I don't think they understand the sense of urgency, and I'm sure a call from the governor to the CEO of CVS in a very friendly way, because we're very thankful that they're here and we're thankful they're committed, just to say, hey, gosh, could you just sort of light a fire under this, because it's really important to this particular community. That would go a really long way. I'm sorry to ask that, but I don't know who else I've tried everything. And,
No, absolutely, and don't be sorry at all. So I can speak on behalf of Director Guthrie, and I know that he will at least have that conversation, so I'll make sure that he's aware of this. In fact, I'll brief him after we get done with any more questions you may have for me, and that'll be the first on the list for me to discuss with him.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Yep.
Well, on that note, since we're talking about the necessities that are essential to the island, 7-Eleven is another one. I know we've had conversations with Mr. Book on that, but if you're picking up the phone to make a call, maybe they could make a 3-way call there and let them know that we could use their help as well, rebuilding as fast as they can.
Absolutely. I'll communicate that as well. Are there any other questions?
Thank you for your time, Stephanie.
Of course, and I apologize that I was not more prepared. I got told last night the questions you might have, and anything, any one of you are welcome to, obviously directly meet with or send me an email, send Director Guthrie an email, and if there's an issue, if there's something you need assistance with, we'll get it done as quickly as possible.
All right. Again, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Book, are you ready?
So while Ron's coming up, so you obviously had some conversations about your appropriation request at Monday's meeting. This is a moving target, dollars-wise and project-wise. Appreciate Ron driving over. He's not 100% health-wise, but we're really looking forward to this coming legislative session. We've very critical requests that we have for our delegation members. I know the mayor talks almost daily. I talk daily with some of our delegation members. We're trying to figure out how to get to Tallahassee when it's appropriate and get in front of the right committees. There's going to be a committee week next week. Ron and I have kind of reviewed the schedule for next week. Mayor's kind of on standby, waiting when it's appropriate. I think right now the resiliency committees that are somewhat tied to recovery efforts from both Nicole and Ian will meet. Representative Botana is on the House Resiliency Committee. We've had several conversations. I'll probably kind of cover for us next week. Ron and I'll make the rounds. When you look at this list, and the mayor and I have kind of talked about a couple of other projects, the hazard mitigation conversation we had yesterday, which you're going to talk about next. There were some projects that didn't qualify that we then bumped to this list. So we're going to go over these things. I think it's difficult. You can talk about numbers, obviously, for Town Hall. You just had a presentation about that. We'll hope that that project will be funded through our partnership with DEM, and it won't be something that we'll have to ask from the legislature. But Ron's here to kind of get feedback from y'all on your thoughts and priorities, and we'll go to work next week.
Mr. Book?
Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity, and I want to again take the opportunity to thank you for giving us the continued opportunity to represent you and your constituents and taxpayers. I got to tell you, sitting here and listening to you all and listening to the presentations you've had so far, I've made 3 pages of notes. You start swirling in it, but I want to begin by where you just left off. I've been doing what I do for a living for a really long time. I've watched disasters hit the state. I don't think there's ever been a time where a governor and the Division of Emergency Management have been more responsive and more engaged and more involved and more helpful to a community in the state than Director Guthrie, the governor, Stephanie. You know, I made a note, Stephanie, don't take this in any wrong way. If you want to talk about a jack of all trades, I will simply rename the cliche. You want to talk about the Stephanie of all trades, and I mean this sincerely. You know, one of the things the governor has done extraordinarily well is put real, true professionals in senior management roles so that a coach like Coach McDaniel doesn't have to go down to the 43rd quarterback on his list when somebody else gets injured. The staff at the high levels simply pick up the ball and they play wide receiver, they play fullback, they play offensive line, defensive line, safety, cornerback. That's what you've gotten. You've gotten their team to basically become an extension of what Mr. Hawley does and what your entire staff does. The fact that Stephanie's here today, whether she says she's well prepared, in her sleep, she can come up here and be prepared, because that's the magnitude of what they've done. I've stepped back, I've watched what you all have done. You haven't heard a lot from me. The phone, you know I know how to drive people crazy when I need to. They've just been responsive, and they've been present. And half the battle in disasters, and I can tell you going back to Hurricane Andrew, is having presence of those at the state level and frankly those at the federal level. Though that's right, they're absent. Your state folks stand in for the feds, because that's the role that FDEM plays when it comes to FEMA, as a conduit between the local government, the state government, and then directly to the folks at FEMA to respond to the things you need. I can't tell you, I mean, I've listened to Chris a bunch of times over the last several months, behind your backs, praise you, but I also know pretty directly what you all have done to be responsive. The fact that you're here talking about how you get a building official that they help identify and they fund, they're not unmindful any more than the governor and Director Guthrie are, that we're a small town with nothing in our pockets. We're not talking about a community with 50 billion, 20 billion, a billion, 500 million, 100 million, 50 million, 10 million in reserves. We know what you have in reserves. They do. The fact is, and I literally, I kid you not, 3 pages of notes, because I'm swirling in stuff to get back to Mr. Hawley about, and as we move into next week and we begin to pound the floors of the state capitol and the mayor's direct engagement as well, it's going to help us communicate those messages. I listened to the presentation. I listened to those early questions that you had about a master plan, a comp plan. Here's what I have conveyed to the mayor and to the manager. At the end of the day, we need that list of what we really believe our needs are. We can talk about a comp plan, and we can talk about a comp plan amendment. That's not your rebuild plan. If we go back, and as you know, and as Mr. Hawley knows, I mean, we've talked about a Hurricane Andrew trust fund model, something similar in a catastrophic storm. I hate to admit that I was around in the halls after Hurricane Andrew, but I was. And we helped write that statute. And the truth be told, it's never really been replicated in any other disaster. The closest we've come to replicating a Hurricane Andrew trust fund type model was the BP oil spill and the continued engagement in funding projects that come out of that multi-county area in the Panhandle from the BP oil spill. I can tell you that what the legislature was willing to do, and they didn't have a Senator Passidomo. They didn't have a presiding officer to say, this is my community and we will rebuild and we need the resources to rebuild. It was a delegation without that level of leadership. They took a base year, prior couple of years of sales tax revenue. They did an average number. They came up with a baseline number which became sort of the ceiling for how you go above that number. They took those sales tax increase numbers, because let's be honest, nobody's rebuilding 50 churches and 50 city halls. We're going to rebuild a handful or two of churches, and we're going to rebuild a city hall for governments. The rest of those rebuild efforts are going to be sales taxable. Well, gosh, is that $1.25? Let's go to the local Lowe's and the local Home Depot. So that's right, they're not here on the island, but where those building supplies are going to be bought from, if we want to avoid 5 years from now or 8 years from now, that project, well, let's just pick something out of the air, an animal services building, because somebody realizes in 36 months, one of the problems, we didn't have anywhere to put the pets. The arts facility, the local parks. If we're fighting the general revenue fund of funding, when we're fighting the allocation to those various subcommittees, it would certainly be a whole lot easier if we had $43 million to spend in fiscal 22, 23, 23, 24, and your delegation working with your town and the others set those annual priorities funding. It doesn't mean we don't go to the general revenue fund for above and beyond what's in there to rebuild, but we need a rebuild plan. And I don't know that I necessarily want, and this is not intended as a shot at the county, but I don't know that I want the county telling the town I represent what those rebuild priorities should be. We should be doing that on our own, and whether that feeds into a master model is up to you all as elected leaders. But at the end of the day, the comp plan's over here, what you want the town to look like. But then it's we will rebuild. And frankly, I would steal the title from what we did after Hurricane Andrew, and it becomes the town of Fort Myers Beach, we will rebuild. If the county wants to become a part of that, that's great. If Sanibel or Estero or anybody else wants to, but then you begin to list in some prioritized order what we go back to them to say, okay, Stephanie, Director Guthrie, tell us what the market will bear with FEMA. Tell me what the market will bear at the Department of Transportation. Tell us what we can go to DC and ask for. That's the list, Mayor, that we, and Mr. Hawley, that we started to talk about a couple of weeks ago. You all have to do that. But I see those as two separate. And if what we do is we rely on, or we're going to spend our time looking at what the architecture should be and how many square foot of this or that there should be, we will lose the opportunity to get the resources, the final resources of what the town needs to rebuild. There will become a time where there's another disaster that FDEM has to turn its attention to, and FEMA has to turn its attention to, and your congressional delegation and your state legislative delegations need to begin to look at. Senator Passidomo is clearly, as is others in the delegation, starting with Representative Botana, who I will tell each of you hasn't knocked on my office door at the Capitol once or twice He's become a part of our office staff because he's there looking to see, is there something you think we can do different than what the town and the community is doing? He's focused on you. I think the rest of your delegation is focused. But the attention span, when there are competing crises, will begin to shrink around us if we don't have that priority plan in place. 7-Eleven, CVS, and I am going to look over this way. I don't think there's anything better to get some of these things done than the request to the governor through the director to make the call to the CEO at CVS. I know what response I've gotten from 7-Eleven, and it is positive, and I am waiting, Mayor, for a schedule on those multiple stores and the fueling in particular, and bringing a tanker in to meet the needs of the community. But I can tell you, the call to Texas or the call to Denver to my CEO will put that not just on steroids, it will put it on Elon Musk's rocket ship speed to meet those needs. There is nobody in America, not a CEO in America, that is going to ignore Governor Ron DeSantis' phone calls. There's just not. And nobody wants the governor singling them out as a corporate entity unwilling to come in and help this small town that's had more than half of its revenue, because I hear it in every phone call with the manager, they don't want to take that heat. I can tell you that there was a point after one of the storms a few years ago that hit Monroe County, and there was belief that one of the petroleum companies had raised prices some amount. Now, I don't know that it reached a gouging point. It wasn't my client, but it was a petroleum client. Pam Bondi mentions it on television once, and all of a sudden they had more fuel trucks coming in than Carter had liver pills. And it was water as well, as you may remember, Stephanie. That needs to go on the list of and where it fits. And that's for Mr. Hawley and I daily, whether it's by phone or by email communication, to say, here's where we need today. What can you get them to do today? I can't begin to tell you the significance of it. I heard mention of a pedestrian tunnel. Well, truth is, that should be on your list of potential priorities. Will the legislature fund rebuilding of a town hall? Well, as we talked before the meeting, depends on how it's packaged. But I can tell you this, I know of $19 million that we helped to secure a couple of years back to build 2 pedestrian safety tunnels and 2 bridges to protect pedestrians. There was no money coming to fund the main project, but we were able to break that off. I can tell you there's another one being proposed this session somewhere, set of those. But we've got to, again, I repeat, can we break things up? Where can we squeeze pieces out of? Home rule, preemption, home rule, preemption. I am certainly familiar with how things shrunk around us. But, Mr. Hawley, if at the end of the day that statute that was talked about, which limited what local governments can or cannot approve, or what they cannot stop as a result of some prior action, I would say to you, that's what small, short amendments with a sunset clause on it can do. They don't want to change the policy they just passed 2 years ago. Well, we need just a short reprieve on that, and here's why. Well, that's right, but I gotta have a rebuild plan with dates tied to it which is what Mr. Holly is going to supervise those consultants on. You all know the technical advisory firms that DEM, FDEM has available to you are significant. They are substantial. There's going to be another disaster. And what I want is for us not to be forgotten. And we only avoid that if we're moving quickly and swiftly. And one of the things we talked about before the meeting is this plan to brand the town. It's not about Lee County, selfishly to me. It's not about Collier County or Sarasota or Manatee or any of the other surrounding communities. It's about the town of Fort Myers Beach. And I want when, and I'm going to use his first name instead of the Mr. piece, when Chris walks down the hallway, Mayor walks down the hallway, all they see is a bright neon sign that says Fort Myers Beach, because they already know. And whether that, as we talked about earlier, whether that's Senator Broxton, who chairs Senate Appropriations, or it's Senator Albritton, who is clearly going to be engaged in his chair and his majority leader role in setting those funding priorities, or it's Representative Botana or Representative Roach or Representative A, B, C, D, E, and F, if you will, from our delegation, Representative Rommel, who is chomping at the bit. What can I do to better help the community? I think, again, all goes back to Mayor Chris, that master plan list of we will rebuild. I know I've missed 33 things here, but if you don't come away with anything other than we need a priority list of we will rebuild. And when you talk to the newspapers and you talk to the electronic media, it's all of you talking with the same voice and the same very short message. Remember, short attention span. It's about we will rebuild. Short attention span. It's about, doesn't matter what they ask you, it's about we will rebuild. It's about that commitment, that dedication, that focus. As a couple of you know, I mean, I was here several days after the storm. I find it amazing that you have moved as much debris as you have moved and put as much in place as you have. I'm here to help. I'm here to be an extension of you. It costs you no more to call me. I don't charge by the hour. I don't charge by the minute. I threw away timesheets in 1987. You know, lawyers, they turn the clock on us. That's not the way it works. You won't wear out your welcome. I'm here to help, and my team is here to help. And so with that, I repeat, I got notes to go back and decipher and create some outlines. But I can tell you, the manager needs sneakers for Thursday. He needs a good pair of sneakers because he's going to be working. So with that, I'm happy to take whatever questions you have.
I just have a comment, Mr. Book. First of all, thank you for being here. Appreciate that very much. If you were to take a look at our meeting Monday, I think you'd be comforted because the town manager put together a list of priorities for us to consider, and I think it's safe to say for my colleagues, we were unanimous in strong support of the priority list that he put before us. And so I would just say to my colleagues, especially these next couple months with Mr. Book here, we need to, and we have a little unique situation with our town charter, but our town charter really empowers our town manager. But our mayor has stepped up in a way that is difficult to describe, particularly the way our charter is designed. But my point is that we have a unified front as to what the priorities are. I think it's important that the council empowers the mayor and the town manager and you, Mr. Book, to put that, to strategize how best to implement that plan over these next couple months. And you're right, we all have to be outspoken, we all have to be reaching out to our legislators, we all have to be talking to the media, whatever direction you all give us. But I think it's important based upon Mondays, meaning that you know that we are united, and we'll support our mayor and our town manager and you as you go forward to the legislature and help any way we can and message it. But I think it's important for you, and maybe you've already talked to Chris about this, but my sense is, based upon Monday's colloquy here at the council, we are united and there's no division here, and we will support you guys as you go forth to Tallahassee 100%.
Well, I will tell you, I will go out this week and get a new pair of sneakers because I'm going to be running the halls with you. So I'll see you, if not before then, I'll see you next week.
Thursday.
Any other questions for Mr. Book?
Well, let's just, now the short list we had of requests, we had what, revenue replacement, town hall, we had lighting, but lighting from our meeting before, and we understand this from our talks, is that FP&L owns the lights, and they lease them, they lease the service to us, and they don't allow other people's property beyond their poles. So I'm not sure where in there we can get revenue that helps us. Do you know what I mean?
As I said earlier, I think Florida Power is they're looking at additional options. I don't know what those will be. I think they understand from our perspective we're willing to pay the additional electricity costs for the 70 whatever lights that were in addition to what we have, and our utility bill for those additional lights obviously will go up. But the idea of basically leasing or financing capital costs through our monthly bill was not something that was acceptable that we could afford at this point. And so I'm anticipating they're going to come back with a plan that your ongoing cost will be the additional electricity that it takes to light the island, but that the capital cost will be handled in another way other than adding it to your monthly bill. That's my understanding with FP&L. I know the gentleman at the podium said he used the word closed. That tier was closed, and my comment was, well, open the dang thing back up. Right. You know. So I'm simple-minded when it comes to this. You know, we have partners at the state, Director Guthrie, that are willing to finance the program. It's important that the island be lit properly. It's important environmentally for turtle protection. We all understand that if there's not a system in place by turtle season, the prospect of turning all the lights out on the island will embarrass everybody. It just can't happen. So I don't want to get on my high horse. I've been on it all week about this project. I'm too emotionally involved and engaged on this one because it seems simple to me. You know, we have a willing partner to help us pay for it. We ought to be at work. We ought to be installing lights as we speak. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we necessarily have to rehash the whole FPL thing. I think to your point, Bill, there's a lot of things that were on that list. There's been some things added over the last couple of days, which I think Tidal Basin is going to cover in their presentation as far as appropriations, 404, 406 mitigation, and that I think will answer a lot of your questions. A lot of it is overlapping as far as what's on this list, what should go over here, what we should ask for. As I think Mr. Book said, we just need to finalize that list, and I think that's what we're kind of going through today to try to get it as close to final as we can so that when we do go up there next week that we know exactly what we're asking for, where can it be covered, where can that can't be covered. And please, Mr. Book, correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these may be on this list today, but they could be on a different list tomorrow depending on answers that you get. So it's important that, although it sounds like there's separate lists, there's really one big list that it's just a matter of how you can fund it.
Right, different funding pools, and we have our big list.
Right, and I think you do them in tiers.
Yeah.
I don't think you necessarily have a singular list, because I think you've got those immediate things that in the 12-month period you can accomplish. The governor's going to want to know, that's great, we've got this list, but what can you spend in this next 12 months? What is the 24-month, the 36-month, the 48-month, the 60th month plan on what you can spend? And those are not only date-timed, if you will, tiers, but they are project-directed tiers. Remember that in the state's budget, I like to use the word silos. there are silos. There's a pre-K to 12 silo. There's a higher ed silo. There is a civil justice silo that, for example, has everything from the courts and the state attorneys and offenders to juvenile justice. I want to look, where can we plug things in that may not make it to the top 10, but are in that third or fourth tier, but all of a sudden there's a priority by the chair, there's an allocation to a particular chair in the House and the Senate. Well, all of a sudden we can slip something else in for $1.3 million or $1.8 million. I don't know what those are until you set them, until we tier them. Because I can tell you that the manager's been extremely clear. The town hall, turtles, and parks and parks and parks.
Revenue replacement.
Revenue replacement is a given if we don't get it.
And I would also,
the bond rating of the state will suffer because we're going to go bankrupt.
But I think part of the argument is not really about the turtles. It's about that we have an obligation, so we can't light any other way. So it's really a public safety issue to get those lights in. Now the other thing is, and I don't know,
free, America's favorite word, free.
Yeah. So the other thing I don't know what pocket of money this might come from, but it comes to me is that the town manager is talking about a transition plan. So they want to know what we're going to do 6 months from now, but then it'd be another 2 years before we have a town hall. So what can we do that is functional for that kind of time, for 2 years between this transition and what we have,
well,
we get town hall?
The key is your financial position. So if we're able to get, and this for me is the biggest ask. I mean, it is and the commitment from the Senate President in the delegation meeting was that they would come up with a plan to supplement the lost revenue that we have. So if we'll have to have another conversation about what in a 3-year period office space will look like. If the state transitions us to where we have to stand on our own, then we'll have to find out how much these modulars are a month, and we'll have to figure out how to afford them, or we'll have to go lease space someplace else, or the ultimate plan that y'all started with was to use Bay Oaks as a town hall. And we'll all move and put our desk on the basketball court and function from there if that's all we can do. We'd rather not do that. So the financial position for you is the critical thing right now, is to make sure that you can pay your bills. And I was asked by the media mayor, and I did an interview yesterday with the new USA Today / Naples Daily News, Fort Myers Press lady. What's the critical thing for the town, and it's to continue to provide services to the citizens, and we're going to need some financial help to do that. I mean, our revenues continue at this point. Now, they could change, to be off on our revenue collections, specifically ad valorem. We're excited. They're going to start charging permit fees again next week. Once you've obviously got a huge amount of activity going on in your permitting operation, and once the revenues get built back up, you'll have options to enhance your staff there if you need to, because you can pay for it. Right now you can't. So I'm getting long-winded. Your financial positions is everything to you, because then you go from there in terms of what are priorities for spending. But in terms of town hall right now, what you're looking at could be your town hall for the next 3 years. But you actually will have to move those, because obviously the fire department wants to build a fire station on the site we're on. So, they may be back behind town hall. We're working as hard as we can to get the League of Cities to finalize their insurance adjustment, their claim process. I'm told that's going to be available by the end of the month. That's only a few weeks away. We're anxious to get an insurance adjuster on to do an inspection of Town Hall. We can't tear it down. I feel you need a public adjuster to look at that building, because that's who's going to represent you with your claim against the league, and this will be a year-long process to argue with the league over your insurance situation. But once you can at least tear down that building, that gives you options, for that property going forward. Right now it's just an eyesore. I'm getting long-winded. Financial position, town hall, Beach renourishment money, there's money in DEP. The legislature during special session, I can't remember the number, a couple of $100 million was sent to DEP. I think there's funding available for your beach restoration program. There's a, as Ron calls it, a silo, there's a silo for that. I think the commitment on your financial situation is there. We just got to give them some ideas on how to do it. Ron's got some ideas, I've got some ideas. That's what next week's about. You know, let's stop talking that we're helping and start talking about how we're going to help. You know, town hall's the big one, you know, but I'm selling the idea that it's a 3-year project and half of this money is reimbursable through FEMA. So we just need kind of some upfront help to get the project started. It can be financed over several fiscal years, state fiscal years and your fiscal years, but we got to at least get a commitment, because we can't sit here and wait, because 3 years is a long time to be in modular buildings.
Yeah, and I do think that, you know, probably when you are lobbying, this is a pretty good imagery to present to them, that we're 3 minutes later, we're in a tent. And when the air conditioner takes off and when a truck gets there, it's difficult to hear, difficult to do town business in this situation.
Well, y'all are you're moving to Diamond Head, as I understand it, as soon as next week for the LPA meeting. We were there last night looking at the space. Keith and I can walk to work if you have meetings there. It's right across the street from where we're renting. So it's a nice facility. It's got elevators that work. So hopefully this is the last meeting in the tent with trucks and beep, beep, beep in the background all the time. So.
The questions from Mr. Book?
Mayor, if I could 1 second, and my cell phone number, Mayor has it, manager has it, Keith's got it, is 305-510-2000. I do not have voicemail. So if you call and I don't answer, simply text me. I threw my voicemail out 4 years ago. It just became too much after hours to return, 40 more messages. So I don't have voicemail, but if you text, I will respond very, very quickly to that text or to the call. You text me your phone numbers, I'll put them in my phone so I know it's you when you call, and I'll grab it, I'll step out of a meeting, but use me. And one last comment on that first presentation. I would simply say, free is great. Pick the best. Pick what firm fits your needs so that you have accountability. If FDEM said those guys are it, assume they are it. On the procurement side, for just one last second, I don't know if all of the states of emergency have expired at this point, but if they haven't, procurement waivers still exist for you. Even if it's not in your code, they're still there. Again, I would say put that on your list to talk to Stephanie and Director Guthrie about, because if you're running into those obstacles, those are the ones that are easiest for us to help solve. We're going into a legislative session, telling us about it the 3rd week of May. We're a day late and $1 short.
Before just a project like Town Hall, which is multiple years, would this mean that we'd have to get funding allocation for each year that the project's going on?
Yes. Yes.
So even if we got approval now, that would maybe get us through some design?
Look, Key West, I'll use Monroe County. They had this massive water project that, Chris, goes back to your days at FAC. All of the political subdivisions, including the Key West Aqueduct Authority, were married to getting this large chunk of money. I'll be off on it. I want to say it was $500 million at the time. State made a commitment to $50 million a year. But guess what? Can't bind legislature to legislature. So all of those entities have to go back every year to make sure that money's there. Only way you end up in a recurring place in Florida is to have something in the statute that binds it. So I would simply suggest to you that once they make a commitment, while it's our job to go make sure it's there every spring, and that it gets over the finish line, and we remind the folks in the governor's office that this was part of that commitment, I don't know that you can count on that. And I think you've got to, put that into your thought process and have those conversations, not just with Director Guthrie and Stephanie, but with Stephanie Kopeloussis and James Altmaier on behalf of the governor, governor's chief of staff, deputy chief of staff who oversees legislative affairs, or with the governor directly. And I think those conversations are what we hope to get out of these next weeks as interim committee meetings go on as we get ready for the legislative session in a month and a half.
All right, thank you, Mr. Book. Next, we got a presentation from Tidal Basin. Eliza, is that going to be you?
So while they're coming forward and handing out the list, so this is, if everyone understands hazard mitigation. This is, I've gotten re-educated in the past couple of months on FEMA funding and how it works. So there's a committee that meets at the county level. I'm still trying to get a copy of the committee so I can see who's on it. I'm going to assume that each town in Lee County has a person on it. I'm told that Jason Freeman is our representative. We're trying to verify that. The counties asked for this list. They wanted it sometime this month. This is just a very preliminary brainstorming session looking at our damage report. This is, make sure I'm right, this is the 404 list. The 406 list, you don't see town hall on here because it's on the 406 list. We've done a lot of brainstorming. This is a long process. This money won't flow for quite some time. You'll have to fight for your share. I've heard varying numbers. Yesterday I heard that it was about $260 million for Lee County that this committee will be able to allocate. I thought it was a higher number, but we'll see what it is. We have to present the list, but there's a long process. You'll have many more opportunities to talk about these projects. You'll have to write grants for them. There's a lot of missing detail on here, but we had to bring it to you in order for us to give a list to the county that had your blessing or at least your understanding. So.
And before you start, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Louis. For the council and for those listening, there's a lot of talk about 404 and 406 mitigation, but I thought yesterday the way that you laid it out was very clear, very simple, so that my colleagues can understand, if they don't already understand what it is.
Absolutely. The most simplest way to explain these two pockets of money. Okay. The easiest way to explain these two pockets of money is 406 mitigation is related to whatever was damaged. So it's something that was damaged, and we're going to build a better, stronger for the future so it doesn't get any other damage. The 404 money is money for areas or elements that were not damaged. So anything that has to do with something that wasn't damaged or something that you want to protect that may have had minor damage that may not be covered by public assistance mitigation, that's kind of the difference. So that's kind of the two pockets, so make it as simple as possible. There's a lot of more details that go into that, but I think for this conversation, I think it really just brings it down to those two elements and bringing that to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I don't know if you want to do an introduction or if I don't know what we're doing. Sorry.
No, so as part of Tidal Basin Services to you guys, we've been supporting you guys through the recovery process, and right now this specific presentation is just on 404, so we're going to have Louis and Jake kind of give you guys a rundown of the projects that they were able to capture based off of their meetings with department heads and their concerns and their needs.
Just so you can, for the record, identify yourselves when you come up so that...
Of course, my name is Eliza Supriana. I'm the project manager for Tidal Basin.
And I'm Louis Avila. I'm the Vice President of Mitigation and cover the mitigation program and in support of the day-to-day work that we're doing here. So I'm going to cover at a high level a little bit about what that list pertains. I've got Jake, who's my top technical person, and kind of really dig into it if we want to. I think, as we talked about, it's a very high level. There's still things that need to be done, but I'm going to walk you through the process so that we get timing and everything done. So as Chris mentioned, right now the biggest thing that we've got to get is we've got to get this list to the county by January 23rd. And what needs to occur is that there has to be a letter of intent, it's LOIs they're called, that needs to be presented so that we can say these are the projects that we're looking at doing. We're going to do these type of projects, either under consideration. Now, the very high level, this is what our team has been working with your team and the directors to make sure and understand where we're going to end up in terms of projects that have mitigation, 404 mitigation for the community. The bigger piece to understand is to say, look, these projects may appear in other lists, as was mentioned before, lists and things like that. These projects may appear in other lists, but we'd rather have it on here. And if it's a federal funded or if it's a FEMA funded project that comes out of mitigation, that's a great thing. There may be other projects that may come on and off of this list. So what we did intentionally is create about 25, 26 projects that are on this list for about $170 million. We talked about the 260 that we believe that the county is going to get, maybe a little bit higher, a little bit less, but it's a ballpark to be able to have a good swag of projects that are going to be there and then a drop of other projects. So that is fundamentally what that list is for, and to be able to show the county and the state that there is going to be more mitigation besides the public assistance damage mitigation that's going to happen. I'll let Jake talk about the projects in particular. Mr. Mayor, I don't know how far you want to go into details, but I think it just gives us a big oversight of where we're at today.
I appreciate it.
Sure. Jake?
Jacob Gray, I'm a Senior Director of Mitigation for Tidal Basin. And on the list, just to give you a little backstory, there's a lot of numbers going around, but the reason why we have so much a high dollar figure is that we're still working projects in South Florida for Hurricane Irma. A lot of projects fell through, so there's a potential for additional funding to go through eligibility and determination for that to meet the program at our level. You will usually figure that out during the scoping and the budget and the benefit cost analysis phase, but then it also goes to the state and they do it, and then the feds and they do it. So there's multiple steps of eligibility that go through. The reason why we have also additional projects on the list.
Yeah, for my fellow counselors, this is it's a very complex process as I'm finding out, and there's a lot of intricacies that I talk to these guys every day, and every day I go home with another list of questions because I try to wrap my head around it. So I commend what you guys are doing for us and helping us get this stuff prepared. With that, any questions for Tidal Basin from my fellow members?
So out of this, I noticed you seem to have some, like particularly the burying power lines, where you say that's a difficult project to get approved.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult one for sure. For you bury anything, you have EHP involved with it, and you have to know where those lines are going to be, and then plus a benefit cost analysis showing if is it beneficial to bury those lines, what was the past damages, and you have to look at all that data and come up with a benefit cost ratio to show that's beneficial to do.
Right, and that's also fairly expensive too, which probably makes it harder to come by.
Correct.
Yeah.
And these guys are here. Someone from Tidal Basin is here pretty much every day. They are here every day, so you can find them pretty easily if you have any specific questions related to this list, or if you come up with something, they'd be more than happy, I'm assuming, to help answer those questions. Anything else, Councilor Beach?
Nope.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much for your time.
Next, we have Visitor Accommodation Resources. Mr. Manager?
Yes, I wanted to, we've had conversations about, increasing numbers of people at the beach. When we expanded or reduced our curfew hours, we brought in parking fees. So with increased people coming onto the island, we've had issues again with porta potties and garbage, and I didn't know council's desire on what level do we want to resource that and provide, because these are not FEMA reimbursable costs. They won't reimburse us for accommodating visitors. So is council interested, and I can come back with some budget numbers. I know Allison put together a plan that she talked to you about briefly the other day on porta potties and strategy for placement around the island. Does council have the appetite to put our general fund dollars, our unrestricted dollars, into expanding some of these programs to accommodate our visitors?
Well, just for clarification, the program that Allison brought forth on Monday was mostly, if not all, covered by TDC funding, correct? So, and that's replacing the resources that the town had before the storm. So we've replaced in kind what was there before. And I think what you're asking is, do we want to expand upon that with the general dollar fund?
Correct.
Just specifically talking about porta potties at this point, but.
So just for clarification, what's included is what was provided before, because the town didn't really have any restrooms downtown, right?
No, there were none in Times Square that were provided by the town. The county has theirs in Lynn Hall Park now, and at Crescent Park they have restrooms as well. Plus we do have 2, I think there's 4, but 2 are provided by a private business there, and then the other 2 are being provided by the town at some capacity.
Now, have we had conversations with TDC and the county about putting some kind of portable restroom in one of the parks?
Well, my intention was to bring that question up today at the TDC meeting. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there because I had to be here, so I had to miss the first TDC meeting I was supposed to be at for this. But maybe Allison can help, or Vice Mayor Adderholt. He's been on the TDC committee for a while. He might be able to help answer that better than I could. Go ahead.
Hello, Allison Geeson, Director of Cultural Parks and Recreation. I did reach out to Nancy McPhee and TDC to see if we could replace and use funds that we have this year allocated for TDC for the replacement of our restrooms at Palm Avenue and at Newton Beach Park, because those are beach accesses. I did inquire about Times Square, and since that's not deemed a beach access, the funding would not be there. So TDC is very particular about the restrooms and what they'll reimburse. If it is for beach access, we can see if there's other beach accesses where some portable restrooms would fit. I know Public Works, Jason Freeman, is doing an assessment to see where we can and when we can place things. Even though we have the funds, we still have to make sure that the areas are safe and free of debris, so we're working hard on that. So if there are places that you would like to have them, that we could find a safe place to put them, we could entertain the idea of asking for funds and allocating money that we already have for this fiscal year to be able to accommodate that. The costs are a little bit expensive, $8,400 a month, 28 days actually for 10 units, and that's a hand wash that. So it is up to you all to see if you wanted to do more than just Palm Avenue and Newton Beach Park. You mentioned that Crescent and Lynn Hall Park. Crescent, I talked to Parks and Recreation for Lee County, and they're hoping to have their little trailer in place the end of March at Crescent, but right now they have temporary restrooms at Lynn Hall and Crescent, so they are assisting with that end of the island that is deemed so busy. So,
do we know how many restrooms Lee County is planning on putting up by Lynn Hall Park?
Right now they only have 4 temporary portable units, and that's all that they said that they were going to have for now. Those will be indefinitely. I didn't get an answer on any other information, but I'll keep you all posted as soon as they come up with a plan. But it's only 4 for now, and then at Crescent we'll have the trailer that was a replacement.
So when I didn't look this morning when I went past there, are the 4 there now?
They should be there now with the stations, yes.
Okay.
They are. I saw them yesterday.
They are.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Allison, a couple thoughts. It is absolutely true that TDC does not recognize Times Square as a beach access. That's been a long time challenge, but I wonder, given the state of affairs post-Ian, I wonder if this might be a unique time to reapply for Times Square to become a beach access, given its current state, and it is the ultimate beach access right now, sadly. But I wonder if there's a way to reapply with TDC given our current unique situation, and even if it's an interim step until it's redeveloped, get some kind of a temporary status from TDC. I think that we might have some empathy given what we've all been through for that to be recognized by TDC, which would help with that funding piece. A. B. Councilor Woodson asked a good question the other day, and I know you're not the enforcement person, but you might opine on this, or maybe the town manager, that these food trucks within Times Square, certainly one of the food trucks that's been there that's most prominent has provided 2 restrooms or porta potties, God bless them, but there's a litany of other entities there now. Does the town require them to help supply a restroom? How are we handling that? And could that help, at least within the Times Square effort. But I do think this TDC application for Times Square to become a beach access again, formally applying, respecting their process, that could be really helpful too. Just a couple thoughts.
Now, I don't have a final resolution to that yet, particularly with regards to Times Square, because the carts apparently are set up on private property, and so we're not actually permitting them. There's not a license to use or agreement on, like we had prior to the storm, with regards to the part of Times Square that we own. So from a permitting standpoint, we don't have as much authority there as I would like, but we are looking into that. I just don't have a final conclusion for you yet.
I thought we had talked about the permitting of food trucks and things, and we said that the only people that got permits for this were people who had existing businesses in those places. And I was up at Times Square the other day, and there's like 3 or 4 that I don't recognize at all. So why are they there, and did something change, or?
Well, I think my recollection of that conversation that we had was that we required first right of refusal, if I'm not mistaken, to the business that was there beforehand. If it was a restaurant, the restaurant that was there would be the restaurant that could go back there. If they chose not to, then they could look at other things as long as it was a restaurant. But if I'm not mistaken, I thought the conversation was if you're a restaurant, you're a restaurant. If you're retail, you're retail. I don't know that we just opened the book to, because you had a restaurant there, now you can have 4 retail shops parked there.
But I think there's also, as John will probably collaborate, that there are certain rules in place for food trucks that you're not really allowed, that inhibit our ability to regulate them. So if you have property, you want to put a food truck on a commercial property and food truck, you're allowed. I think.
Actually, my recollection is consistent with Councilmember Veach as well as the mayor's, which is if you had an existing restaurant use or you could either put one, bring one on, or if you had one and or you elected to, have a food truck under the name of the business, or provide it as a site to another food truck, subject to an agreement between the property owner and the food truck operator. I think separate and distinct is the issue of food trucks on the right-of-way, which we have very little discretion to regulate under state preemption laws, unless they're blocking traffic or otherwise impeding accessibility to private property, etc. But bottom line, my distinct recollection was that the council's direction was if the owner of the property themselves did not want to take advantage of the food truck alternative, they could make their site available to a food truck operator subject to an agreement between the property owner and the food truck operator. If you wish for that to be different, instruct us and we'll change.
If we go with anything with a food truck, are we allowed to put in a requirement that they have to provide facilities for their customers? They don't have to provide it for all of Times Square, but provide facilities for their customers as part of them being there?
I don't think that's a state law requirement. If it's of a permanent nature, where they're putting out chairs and providing food service, a different analysis, a different potential conclusion, and a requirement that they do so. And that there was also discussion about putting down, for lack of better characterization, like pod, restaurants that would then operate outdoors. Yes, they would have to provide facilities, but if it's a food truck by definition is not a permanent use, and therefore doesn't trigger the requirements for providing sanitary facilities for patrons. we can look into it, but my prior research, as I recall, is that it's subject to state Department of Health regulation, and that's pretty much it. So if they have a state license, they can show us that they're in compliance with the DOH licensing requirements. It's about the extent of what we can do from an enforcement standpoint.
I think we want to bring it back to your original question. Does the town want to get into the funding of porta potties for the general public, essentially, is what you're looking for direction on?
And we already are to some degree, so it's whether we really want to expand that, right?
Correct. We've supplied back through TDC funding what was there originally before the storm. But I think the town manager is asking, do we want to take general fund dollars to pay for more facilities?
I have a question, Allison. This has kind of been your purview as you've supplied these relief stations around the island. Do you have a sense, given what the county's now doing, and all the other variables, are there particular areas of need, given your experience and your staff's experience? You see the demand, you're out there. Is there particular areas that we have a particular need? Obviously, Times Square for a while was not being met. The county's infusion has helped, probably still needs some help probably from the town, given what we just heard about the food trucks. But again, these are tough times. The other question for you on that same question is Newton Park was always a kind of a key halfway point in terms of the restrooms at Newton Park. Wonderful restrooms, served everybody going up and down that beach, and certainly helped a lot of the people who live in that area, so that people aren't using their yards. You said that was part of the TDC request for Newton Park, so we're going to be okay on Newton Park. Okay.
Yes.
To the mayor's question, which is a good one, I think we need to be discerning on that because it is extremely costly, but I do think that Times Square area clearly has become a center or a gathering place, and we probably need to do something from a public health standpoint to help that, I think. But I'm not sure exactly how this Lynn Hall Park infusion of restrooms, that'll help a little bit.
If there's a general concurrence here, I know we're open-ended dollars right now and all that, and it's probably not too awfully expensive, but I'll put together something and come back and a proposal to enhance beyond what Allison's plan can do and bring that back to you.
I think that would be important. Jason can identify what areas, I mean, pretty much all of the beach accesses have been damaged to some point, so we could be talking a lot about nothing at this point. So I think until we know how many we'd be really looking at and what that cost would be, to just open the checkbook, for lack of a better term, would be a little premature in my opinion.
The receptacles, I know there was a piece in there about the TDC, about the receptacles that all for just general trash from the beach and that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then I know you said something on Monday or whatever day it was about the lineup of porta potties that are further south and that we don't own them, or what is the status?
It's a private. It's nothing that the town or state is providing. It's a private.
Is that private person willing to distribute those?
In my conversations with the people down there and around the island, those are being supplied by the larger companies that are working on the condos for their employees.
For their employees,
right.
Okay. Okay.
So that was one of the partnerships that did happen. Was the county is right next to Times Square, so having additional restrooms, which are TDC funded through that with Lynn Hall Park, and then Crescent would be a way to continue to serve the funds, although it is a county park. So the ask for that was great, and as the need grows, that would be the recommendation while we work on to see if they would deem Times Square a beach access.
Now, is TDC funding strictly on this kind of annual funding basis? Is there like emergency funding for things?
They do, and I've done a couple of out-of-cycle requests. So that is something that if you want that direction, you could do. I did that for Newton Beach Park restrooms, and there's been emergencies that have come up that people have requested money out of the cycle. So that is something that the town could do if they wanted to do that. We have funds right now that we just signed the interlocal agreement on, and because Newton and certain expenses are not going to be accrued because of the devastation of that park, we have some funds that are extra to reallocate, and I asked if we could do that, and of course they were very compliant. Yes, you can, because it matches the funding requirements for what TDC will fund. So as long as we stay within that, we have 1.4 million this year total. That just started October 1, so we are allocating that. So we have some money, but like the trash receptacles and things like that. So you can ask for additional money out of cycle.
And are you in communication with the county rec people about them asking for money for Crescent Beach and Lynn Hall Park?
Well, they have their funding available as we do this fiscal year. So I verified that, and that they have funds to be able to go ahead and fund what they are funding now for the restrooms. And those are indefinitely until permanent restrooms can get at Lynn Hall Park and Crescent Beach.
So I'd certainly like to encourage the county to do this, because they have the funding for downtown where we don't.
I think you got your direction. Did you hear what you needed to hear?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Is there anything?
I've got a couple questions. The 8,400 for 28 days, is that just for the facility? Does that include cleaning?
That includes cleaning. So
okay.
We worked this up to be able to go ahead and provide TDC funds for Newton and Palm. So that would be 10 units total. These are just porta potties with 2 ADA and washing stations, and that does include cleaning. Okay. That does.
And now for the trash cans, is that just for the receptacles themselves, or does that include pickup?
So Jason's staff, and he can speak on that if you have additional questions, but those would be putting at the beach accesses, and there's already some at Times Square to be able to help with that issue. So this would be funded by TDC, and we'd be putting all the beach accesses. And I do believe his staff does the trash pickup for that. And
Thank you.
All of that is funded for TDC.
Thanks, Allison.
You're welcome. Any more questions?
Thanks, Allison. Do you have more within this visitor accommodation resources, or was that the only one?
No, that was that one. Recreation priority is the only other item that I have.
So we're done with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
What about parking?
Ma'am?
Parking, I know that, so now that we have opened up parking again for pay, we're going to see a lot of off-street parking taking place. We already are, people trying not to park where they have to pay. Crescent Beach is one prime example. They're just pulling up to the sand. Can we get no parking signs? Can we do anything about that? I mean, what are we going to do?
Well, I'll take this one if you want me to take it. I planned on reaching out to Commissioner Sandelli today about that specific issue. As you know, it's their park. So my suggestion would be if they'll allow us to do it, or if they will do it, put up some sort of fencing, orange fencing, something to prevent them from driving out on the beach. As you go down there, you notice they're moving closer and closer and closer to the beach, and now that the sand has been filled back in and that seawall's covered, it's a very easy drive if you wanted to just drive right out onto the beach. So my fear is that someone's going to do that or get run over, or so we have reached out to the county about helping us with a parking solution. As of right now, they're in a holding pattern with their FEMA people trying to work through what they need to do to make that a reality. So we're working with them to try to do what we can do to provide as much parking as we can, but we do have to do, in my opinion, something about just the willy-nilly parking up on that sidewalk over there and in that sand, because they are progressing closer and closer to the beach. So that would be my suggestion to try to help mitigate some of that. I'm not a huge fan of always just jumping to a ticketing, but at some point we have to do something for no other reason the safety of that part of Crescent Beach. So with that, I'll stop being long-winded. Does anyone have any objection to the town manager working at Angle or myself working with the county?
I'm good. Just on the recreation item. We've been making progress, obviously, with the beach access points, with our other parks. Mound House grounds are very close to opening, and the repairs to the facility itself should hopefully be done in the next, 6 weeks perhaps, Allison? So bringing things back online. Obviously, Bay Oaks is the big question mark there with town hall activities there potentially versus recreation. And what I kind of just wanted to have a discussion about was the pace at which you would like to see, kind of recreation coming back for adult programs and kid programs.
I'll just kick it off, Mr. Town Manager. I had a chance to interview Larry Peterson, who's overseeing a lot of those efforts, and he's doing a great job. One of the things I talked to him about, it sounds as if the hope is that this Bay Oaks facility potentially could be available within 3 months for the town to transfer facilities into. And the only thing I asked him about and cautioned him on is that we need to be sensitive to the beach school schedule. The beach school looks like it, good Lord willing, will be opening again in the fall. And so we'll need to have enough room at Bay Oaks to accommodate those after-school programs, because that's a big piece of their puzzle. So, and I think that's all doable. And Larry seemed to think it was possible to have, to insulate the town staff needs and also have some room for some recreational facilities. So I think that's the one piece of the puzzle we need to be sensitive to, as well as making sure that debris pile is out by the time school starts, which I think it will. But just those are two issues that I think we just need to have on the radar screen.
So along those lines, because one thing that became apparent when we were talking about this earlier is that it's probably easier to come up with temporary facilities for the kids than it is to come up with a temporary town hall, right? So if there's something we could do with, tents or something like that for the kids. The other thing is, what's the state of the pool? And is that part of our funding requests? And because the pool has some structure around it as well.
Allison Geeson, Director of Culture, Parks, and Recreation. Actually, the pool, we will find the status of that out. We have, I think Tuesday, they're going to be draining and removing debris, and then tomorrow, I think they're going to be removing the debris and cleaning the pool deck. So we'll know more after we can get and see what situation the pool is in, and then the buildings. But we have to have everything power washed and cleaned out and everything. And we've just now secured contractors, and they have scheduled with us. So should be able to answer that in the next week. After that has been completed, then the next step will be to be able to assess and see what needs to be done to get it functional.
And do you think it's feasible to build some kind of temporary structure or near the pool or adjacent to the pool to work as the after-school program?
There are a lot of requirements for the after-school program to be a closed gym for security reasons for school children. So we would need to really make sure that all of those guidelines for the safety of the children are in place. But I could definitely come up with a plan and let you all know how we could do that.
Yeah, we're going to have some difficult decisions to make regarding Bay Oaks building when it comes to using it as a town hall. Speaking with Larry yesterday, the money for that is coming from an emergency funding from FEMA, and with that is requirements. So the funding request was put in as used for town hall. So with that has to be used as town hall, or you don't get that money. So to your point, we're going to have to figure something out along the ways when we get to when the school will open back up for those after-school programs. But it's my understanding that in order to get that money that we're going to need to make Bay Oaks Recreation Center habitable, we have to use it as a town hall.
And I don't want you all to forget that Mound House is a great space that we could also cross over the recreation and the after-school program into the existing structure that we have there.
Okay,
so I really want to be able to complement and utilize that space as much as we can, and then we'll have Newton, which will be a blank slate, and as we progress with that and all the moving parts to be able to accommodate both recreation and our after-school program in conjunction with that property that we have already available, and we can make accommodations. So
So the Mount House is an old building that withstood numerous hurricanes, including Ian, but are you confident that it can withstand the energy of a bunch of school kids?
Yes, absolutely. We have 2.77 acres. They can just run around and have fun, and then some programming space inside. Yes, absolutely.
Well, we certainly have to put our thinking caps on. We're fortunate we have a lot of residents that are very smart people, and I'm sure between their input and the input of staff, we'll figure out a solution.
We will, I'm
to make sure they have a place to run and wear themselves out so they don't wear us out. All right, thank you, Allison.
We're working on defining town hall, on defining the length of time that we're obligated to have town hall at that facility. So we're working on defining a lot of it's unknown at this point, but as Allison said, and we just talked about, the desire would be that we can cross over functions and still provide some programming out of there to some extent, but that's unknown also. But it is a priority to us, and of course it is to Allison's department, that we phase things back in, as just like with everything, there's a push to get everything phased back to normal ultimately.
And I think it's important, and I started looking into this yesterday, that we have to remember, as you saw from this presentation with Town Hall, the time frame just for designing is a year. I think we need to keep in the back of our minds, and I've talked to Jason, I know about this, and Larry about this, and some other people about, we have a building that's permit ready, that we have in our back pocket that we can use. We have to obviously work with the tidal basin people, but that could be a solution to something if we can find the right funding source to make it happen and cut some of this time frame down. But it's just something to think about. I don't want that to get lost. I know I've been talking about it a lot lately, just because I don't want all the work that went into that to disappear when it could be a potential solution for something that we need now. Any other questions?
Thank you. That concludes my stuff.
Yeah, that included H as well, the development incentives and public purpose.
Yeah, I lumped that up there with the master planning discussion and the post-disaster recovery plan. So
all right,
I'm good. Thank you.
That'll bring us to agenda management.
Now, just a second. So, you feel we've discussed that enough? Like what incentives
I think on the master planning, and I think what I took away was that we would talk to some knowledgeable planners. I'd like to try to get them back here and talk to council about that whole process and what that entails, so that we can go into it a little more knowledgeably.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the direction I was looking for at this point.
Okay, so it's rolled into something that's a future
correct
item, generally speaking. Okay.
So under agenda management, is there anything that my new counselors would like to add to upcoming discussions at future M&P meetings?
I think at the council meeting on Monday, we talked about, and I don't see it on here, but the short-term rental, having a discussion on that, and also the permitting for beach chairs and all that kind of stuff. So I think, we committed to that, and I think we need to have that discussion.
So yeah, the beach chair, jet ski, parasail, they have pretty valid concerns to me that everything's kind of frozen. They don't want to lose their license by not operating, but also they need to prove that they're still an ongoing business to be able to get their SBA loans, which they need to be an ongoing business.
And for their insurance as well. They have to.
John, I know we can't vote on anything here, but to what she just said, we did say on Monday that we were going to talk about it today, but obviously there were several other things to talk about. Is there a way to give, through this process, to give direction? And I don't want to speak for my other council members, but I certainly don't want our vendors that have been here for a long time, that have been operating, to work under fear that they're going to lose their license or not get their license until we can get this worked out as to exactly what it's going to look like.
I think that the simplest solution to that question whether they be a personal watercraft or chair rental, or short-term rentals for that matter. And I think that the short-term rentals come due on a different date. So there's they're two separate dates. Is to, direct staff that the policy is that we freeze everything as it was on the date that Hurricane Ian made landfall. And I don't think that anyone, I can only speak for myself as a staff member, that there's any intention at all that somehow staff was going to tell any of these permit holders, sorry, you're now out of luck, you no longer have anything. And if that's your direction to staff, the exact opposite message is what we will convey to the holders of those permits. Once you're up and ready, we'll renew the permits. I do think that there's a chicken before the egg issue here of, can we issue a permit to someone who isn't up and operating because a condition precedent to the issuance of permits on all these issues are that they meet certain minimum requirements. They have a site, they have a location, they have a business, they have a BTR. So there is some circularity to the issue, but again, if it's the decision and the direction of this council, which you can confirm here today, that in no way, shape, or form is anyone going to be losing their license, and that everything is frozen in time until we're up and operational, that's the direction that we'll take. And that's the direction that staff has been taking to date.
That then, I mean, I know you can't speak for their insurance companies, but how do they prove that they have an existing license when there's an expiration date on the license and we haven't had a formal renewal so that they can keep their insurance?
Well, again, I don't know what point in time they are or what point in time the town is as to when those become renewable, but I'm making a educated guess based upon the best information I have available to me and to all of us, is that on the date that Hurricane Ian hit, which is the date of loss, they had operational licenses and operational businesses, and the city has taken the town has taken no steps to revoke or otherwise modify those permits. So they should be able, at least in my opinion, to go to their insurance carrier, to go to the SBA and say, on the date of loss, I had and was operational, and here's my paperwork showing that on that date I was operational.
Is there something that the town can do, whether it's through social media or just a letter basically stating what you just said, that the town's staff or the town's position is, if your license lapsed due to Hurricane Ian, it's still essentially in effect?
I think certainly we can do that if they run into issues. If they come back to us and say, my company or the SBA or whoever it is won't process my application for reimbursement or loan or whatever in the absence of something in writing from the town, then we obviously can provide that again if that's the direction of this council.
So then how would we delineate between issuing that letter saying you still have a valid license for your insurance purposes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you get to automatically go back out on the beach and do your business because you don't meet the rest of the requirements that are to have that?
And again, that's the circularity to that issue, which is, and the permit will be renewed subject to compliance with all the criteria in the code.
And maybe that could be put in the wording to that letter, that this is, although you're currently licensed, doesn't necessarily allow you to operate within.
Well, I think that the key is that the letter says that on the date of loss, they were properly permitted and licensed by the town, and that upon continued compliance with the requirements in the town code, that permit will be renewed in due course.
I think it's really important. Sharon was here on Monday and spoke. I mean, I think they're facing renewal January, so we need to get this to them so that they can get their insurance covered and that type of thing. Because she even said they're not ready to open yet, but their insurance is due and they can't get it.
Okay. I mean, I think that it's. I never like to make generalizations because there's always exceptions. And I don't know the specific circumstances of Ms. Faircloth and what her issues are. But as I understand the discussion here today, is the direction of the council is for staff to work with her to overcome whatever problems she's having, and we will do so.
We'll then have the issue, and we can work through it, but we'll have the issue of if they've received a license January 1st, but they can't rent until July because of repairs, they need to pay a fee of to some degree. So January 1st, if we license it, are they paying a full year's fee or prorated to July when they actually can start renting?
Yeah, I think they'd asked Mr. Town Manager for the fees to be prorated, and that certainly sounds fair from my perspective.
If I may,
yeah.
I think we're talking about two separate but related issues. Ms. Faircloth is not here. As I understand it, is her need to renew her insurance, which was due and needed to have evidence that she had a valid license from the town this month. Her permit, to the extent that it was issued in the fiscal year 2022-2023, is still valid.
Yeah, she had asked about when she renews her permit, if it's only for half a year, she'd asked for it to be prorated, not necessarily at the Monday meeting, but I think she met with us privately, individually.
Again, and I'm just going off of memory.
Yep.
The renewal time period has not come about. In other words, her existing license that she has for 2022-2023 is valid and can be used for showing proof that I've been properly licensed by the town of Fort Myers Beach. The direction of this council, as I understand it, is that we will then, if necessary, write and put in writing and provide to any of the license holders a letter to whom it may concern that they have right now. They have a valid license. It becomes a renewable during the, I think it's either March or May. One of the M months is what comes to mind, and that at such time the town has will renew that subject to compliance with all the criteria in the code.
I'm certainly okay with that direction. The discussion about the fees, I think, should be brought back to a council.
I've got a copy of Sharon's email that went out to us last Friday, and it talks about it. She submitted the required application information in September of 2021. I think she might mean 22 because she did say prior to Hurricane Ian, and have recently resubmitted all the information to the town. In addition, the SBA is requesting a copy of our licenses in order to process our much needed loans. They want proof that we still have a business.
Again, if the renewal was in September 2022, it is good for 1 year and the town would not renew it or accept renewal applications until sometime in August of 2023, because they're good for a year.
I think what she's saying is she never got anything back when she put something in because it was interrupted by Ian. So they're asking, where do they go from here?
We'll check, because there was at least a month's period of time between when the licenses are renewable and when the hurricane actually hit, which was the last week of October, and the staff in September. I'm sorry. So we will work through it and we'll get it done.
Yeah, I think the direction is to have them come in. We've given direction to the staff to work with the applicants to get what they need to be able to make sure that their insurances or whatever they need.
We will.
I think that we've got that covered.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Town Attorney, that was helpful clarity. Could you give additional helpful clarity for those people who own short-term rentals? They're trying to. Many of them are severely damaged. They don't want to lose their status as a rental. They also don't want to pay if they're not able to rent their place. How is the town interpreting the short-term rental ordinance at this point, given Hurricane Ian? And could you give some guidance and direction? There's a lot of folks out there asking us those questions.
I'm not the planning staff, but I understand it's the same as the discussion we just had with regard to beach rentals and personal watercraft. Again, those renewals are later on and in the year, and we would process them in the normal course of business, subject to compliance with what are the criteria. So I'm absolutely clear to anyone who's listening and to this council. I'm unaware of any policy directive or policy implementation that seeks to limit, deprive, or otherwise revoke any short-term rental regulation approval, any PWVL license, any parasailing or beach rental. We're not doing anything at all to impede, revoke, or not renew those approvals, those licenses, subject to compliance with the code. I don't know how clear I can be.
No, but that is clear. That's what we needed. Yeah, so that's appreciated. Yeah. And so in that list of or litany of items you referenced, could we also include the grandfathered, quote-unquote, quiet zone of some of the, there's just very few short-term rentals that fall into that, particularly if they're damaged, they can't.
Whatever category they fall in.
Okay, we get these questions, and so this is the kind of clarity people are looking for, so it's very helpful.
Just to be clear, so that the few places that are in zoning areas that don't allow short-term rentals that have the grandfather license, that will continue to grandfather them. Right? Did they won't lose it by not
right. In other words, they wouldn't be
basis.
harmed by the fact that their properties are injured or disabled, destroyed, whatever you want to say, as a result of the storm. They wouldn't be disadvantaged by that. That's all. I think that's the request.
Well, I believe I asked the town attorney this specific question on this. That could change, though. Am I correct? If they sell the property to someone else.
Yes, there are certain triggering mechanisms. I don't have the regulation in front of me, so I apologize. I'm not able to access the internet from this location.
But to the mayor's point, though, that would happen whether there was Hurricane Ian or not, right? I mean, that would, if they sold the property, they would.
Right. I just don't want to set the expectation that we said you're still grandfathered in, but you sold your property.
No, that's a fair point. Fair point. Yep.
You all have adopted. And prior councils over the years have adopted your regulations. Staff is following those regulations. If they need to be amended to account for particular circumstances, we'll bring those items to you all if and when they become an issue. But other than that, we're just implementing the code.
All right. So for the purpose of agenda management, I think what I've heard is bringing back the discussion about the fees for short-term rental as well as the beach vendor licenses to have a discussion on it on a future M&P. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes? No?
I think
To do it at an M&P, or do we want to do it at a council meeting where we can actually vote on something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, if you look to actually the agenda management attachment, you will see that one of the items
we don't have those.
We'll be bringing before you. Oh, I'm sorry.
I do.
And there's a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, about 12 items on the agenda management And one of those items is, where was it? Second reading of ordinance 22-12, fees by resolution ordinance. So as you may recall, we had first reading on an ordinance prior to the storm that would consolidate in one location in the code the ability of the town council to adopt and modify any of your fees unless otherwise specified by state law, that it had to be by ordinance, by resolution. So what I would recommend is that this ordinance be adopted on second reading, and then we bring back the resolution to you all, and you all can have at it. Tell us what you want deleted, what you want amended, or as is.
It sounds like a good plan to me.
Yeah, it's scheduled for the February meeting. Yeah, we need to advertise it, and I think the deadline to be able to advertise it for the second meeting of January has already passed, so we would place it on the agenda for second reading and approval at the first meeting in February, on February 6th. And then on the subsequent meeting, we'll bring the actual resolution. We can actually put the resolution on there as well, as long as you take it up procedurally after you adopt the ordinance.
I think that sounds like a good plan to me.
I just want to be clear, because I did receive an email from someone that is questioning the whole process and wants us to revisit that. Would that be something we could do at that point, or the short-term rental process?
The short-term rental process, if you significantly modify it, you'll lose your grandfathering because of state preemption. The law on preemption, specifically related to short-term rentals, was amended, I believe, last year to allow you to make it less restrictive. But if you start modifying substantively the regulations, unless they're limited to less restrictive, then you will lose your grandfathering altogether.
Yeah, Councilor King, we had a lot of discussion about this, and it was, if I remember correctly, specifically about the wording for a monthly thing. And John and his staff reached out, I believe, to the state legal team, and as he just said, if you change one word, it would not benefit the short-term rental business if we changed the way we do it. Anything else?
So to maybe a more subtle point that Councilor King just made, John, are you suggesting this resolution, or this resolution be brought up on second reading?
Or
because we would want to have proper.
What I'm suggesting is that we would place the actual resolution of the fees on the same agenda, February 6th, as the ordinance. So once you adopt the ordinance, which says you can do all these by resolution, you can then take up the resolution.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because the last time we raised the short-term rental fees, there wasn't an opportunity for public input. And so I just want to make sure that we would have a subsequent hearing so people could weigh in and have input.
I think that's abundantly clear that you all want to have a robust discussion about what the fees should or shouldn't be.
Very good. Thank you.
Is there anything else anyone would like to add to the list of the agenda management?
I've just got a couple things, and these are more M&P kind of discussions. One is, like I said before, we've gone down the road considerably with the CB zoning and some ideas. I'd really like to just bring the new councils up to speed and refresh that as a maybe future M&P. And the other is the kind of conversations about Times Square, whether we getting FEMA and DEP involved to give us direction on what we can do to rebuild Times Square, either in a council meeting, an MP, or some kind of charrette with the property owners. I think I'd like to see that on an agenda item somewhere, just so we keep it visible.
Okay.
If there's consensus.
I'm certainly in favor, and you only need 2. Councilor King, anything you'd like to add to agenda management? What? Been a long morning. My apologies.
No.
Ma'am.
No, I think just to piggyback on Councilman Veach, I think when we're talking about having this workshop, I think that's all included. It's downtown, it's residents, it's restaurants, the whole.
You mean specifically the CB zoning?
Well, CB zoning, but I'm talking about when we're looking at the planning, it's going to be looking at all encompassing.
And you know, one of the real specifics about CB zoning is because when the town was formed, they froze the intensity of every business. So it means if you were an office, you could not become retail without coming and asking for a variance. And it's very restrictive. So the idea of specifically CB zoning is there's so many of those businesses have been destroyed and are looking to rebuild with some clarity. And I understand what you're saying, that everything works, but if you come up with something that works for CB zoning, maybe we could also apply it to all commercial.
I believe that Eddie and Cordano Group is working on that as part of their recommendations, which may be presented at the LPA meeting next week. I don't know if it's in there or not, that specific part of it, but I know they were tasked to look at that because Jason was very adamant about to us that's an issue that needs to be addressed. So as long as we keep it in, I think, Jason Green's mind, to keep it in Eddie's mind, that should be one of the things included in there. We've already kind of got that ball rolling.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Adderholt?
I have nothing additional. Thank you.
Now, Councilor King?
Yes, sir. Just for my own clarity, and John had alluded to this agenda management list previously, I guess I'm not sure what we do with these things. I see something going back to last February, and it's always no meeting date set on there. How do we start knocking these things off the list?
Well, there's a couple things there that I put on that can be knocked off because it seems like it's a different world post-Ian. But I don't have the list in front of me.
Well, it's things like ordinance for trees / vegetation that was added last May. FMB Waterways Group Discussion Island-wide dredging program that was added last February. So I guess the task person in me wants to go down this and see what we can do instead of just pushing it out to the next agenda meeting,
I think that's a good idea.
I would tell you that the one item here that's one of the items that's got my name on it, is discussion of Times Square rental rates. That can be taken off.
We can direct staff, I think, to look at that and work at cleaning off some of that stuff that may no longer be relevant.
And there's also, Councilor King, there's quite a few items that are very complicated that take quite a bit of staff time to put together.
I'm not disputing any of that. I'm just saying we've got this list. Every month we keep getting this list. Sometimes there's stuff added to it. How do we start addressing these things instead of continuing with this same list? Like I said, some of them goes back to February of last year.
Well, if I may, for example, the second item on the list, ordinance, signs, LDC amendment, that can come off. You all approve that. So, you know, we will do that. I mean, there's certain amount of work on our end to update this as well, and we'll begin the process. Is kind of, you know, it's laid dormant. I mean, I've seen, you know, I've seen this list, you know, be 3 pages long at some points in time. So we do have it as a fairly manageable. The third item, Pink Shell CPD, that will be going before the LPA next week, and then we'll come back to you all presumptively in the month of February for first and second reading. That's a rezoning request. So,
John, say that last one again, just so the public can be aware of what's coming before the LPA. Say what you just said again.
Yes, the Pink Shell has submitted an application to amend their CPD, their commercial plan development approval.
Thank you.
And it's scheduled to be considered by the town LPA at next week's LPA meeting. and after that, it will then come to the town council for first and second readings.
It's so hard to hear here. I thought you were talking about the new flood map, because I know the LPA just considered that at its last meeting. Do you have any idea as to where that is in the process and when that could come before the council?
No, I think it's still in the discussion stages.
Okay.
But again, we can get together with staff to update the list.
Yeah, the flood map it impacts everybody on the island. I just want to make sure that people have an idea as to when that might come before us, so they can engage if they would like to.
Yes, I would make an educated guess that it'll come before the town council next month and a half.
Okay.
For first and second reading.
Thank you.
And then we can, to Councilmember King's point and request, we can start putting in more dates on the right-hand side and updating that as we go along, and of course remove items as the town council takes action on them. And it's a fluid document. As I said, I've seen it multiple pages, and now down to the 12 or 13 items that are on there now. And I expect with this town council, like previous ones, it'll grow in size, shrink in size throughout the course of the year.
And one kind of request for Amy is that when we do the M&P, maybe it'd be handy to have that attached to our agenda. Not the whole packet, but the list of the agenda items.
It wasn't it? Yeah. That's how I printed it.
It was, yeah, I think what he's talking about, not all of us have printers in our campers, so.
Yeah, what's provided to us, not the digital.
So if we can.
Darn, Dan, why don't you get a printer in your camper?
Well, I'm working on it. Anything else, Councilor King?
No, thank you.
Okay. Do we have to have a motion for an adjournment, or can we do? Anybody?
So moved.
I'll second. A motion is second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned at 11:56.
It's a pirate adjournment. Aye.